Thank you, Senator Merkley. Senator Kennedy's up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Doe, as I understand your testimony, you're saying that at some point climate change is going to cause municipal bonds to default. Is that right?
No, I would say that they will be under pressure just because there'll be increased budgetary concerns.
Well,
so
can they withstand that pressure?
I think so.
Then
yes.
what's the problem?
Problem is that there might be a higher interest rate if there are issues that aren't addressed by state and local governments, that if because of, let's just say, an anticipation of extreme weather events.
So you're worried that interest rates will go up?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking on your website. You say, my quote, I'm quoting now, contribution to the municipal industry has been extensive as an analyst, strategist, and visionary of the industry's future, close quote. So I want to tap your visionary expertise. At what point do you think climate change is going to cause interest rates on municipal bonds to rise to the point that the interest rates will be prohibitive? When will all this happen?
Well, I'll dust my crystal ball off, but perhaps I think in 10 to 20 years.
10 to 20 years, okay. What do you think we ought to do about it?
I think we ought to be able to identify where infrastructure is most vulnerable to weather events, and that infrastructure is then, appropriate dollars are used to modernize infrastructure. For example, in the town of Marshfield,
I want to cut you off because I don't have much time. You think we ought to spend money?
Wisely and appropriately.
Okay, sure. Well, nobody around here ever stands up and says, I've got a good idea and I need to spend money unwisely and inappropriately. Correct. You understand that, right?
I do.
Okay. Do you support the world becoming carbon neutral by 2050? Would that solve? Do you support that?
I don't think that's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, but if it were, do you support it?
Doesn't seem like it's a bad thing.
Okay. Do you support the United States becoming carbon neutral by 2050?
This may not be possible.
But do you support it?
If it were the right mix of power and energy in order to provide the electricity that's needed for essential needs.
Well, you do
yes.
understand that that's the goal of the most ardent proponents of climate change, do you not?
I do understand that.
Okay. How much will that cost?
I couldn't give a figure to that because it's outside my area of expertise on that.
You think we ought to just start spending money without an understanding of how much it's going to cost?
I don't think that's ever wise.
Okay. Well, don't you think we ought to look into how much it's going to cost?
Again, that's around that area. That's not an area of expertise. I'm really focused on addressing the updating of infrastructure for our state and local governments.
You don't seem to have very many solutions. Except what I take away from your testimony is that climate change is going to cause interest rates to rise on municipal bonds, so at some point the cost will become prohibitive, and we need to spend money on infrastructure to stop it. Where do you think this money should come from?
I think state and local governments have the capacity to borrow because the rates are significantly low, and there's an opportunity now to do so and be proactive.
So you think state and local governments ought to borrow the money?
I do. I think they have the capacity to do so.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of car do you drive?
I drive a Jeep Wagoneer.
Is it gas or electric?
It's gas.
Okay. Do you have a gas stove?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have a heat pump?
I do not.
You don't?
I do not.
Oh, okay. How big a house do you live in?
I live in a condominium of 853 square feet.
Okay. I'm over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Spiegel, I see you hiding down there. What does yada, yada, yada mean?
I'm not familiar with the term, Senator.
Very uncool. Can we agree that what you do, not what you say, what you do is what you believe and everything else is just cottage cheese?
Yes, Senator.
You agree with that? Speak up. Don't be shy. I've listened to you today. I've heard a lot of yada, yada, yadaing. And I've heard you talk about the reforms you've made, and I appreciate them. And I've heard you talk about the reforms you're going to make. But I don't think you're going to solve the problem. I think Congress is going to have to help you. I think the reforms you're talking about to some extent are going to be like putting paint on rotten wood. And I'm not sure you're going to support this legislation. I'm not. The fact is that you and some of your internet colleagues who are not here are no longer, you're not companies, you're countries. You're very, very powerful. And you and some of your colleagues who are not here have blocked everything we have tried to do in terms of reasonable regulation. Everything from privacy to child exploitation. And in fact, we have a new definition of recession. A recession is when, we know we're in a recession when Google has to lay off 25 members of Congress. That's what we're down to. We're also down to this fact that your platforms are hurting children. I'm not saying they're not doing some good things, but they're hurting children. And I know how to count votes, and if this bill comes to the floor of the United States Senate, it will pass. What we're going to have to do, and I say this with all the respect I can muster, is convince my good friend Senator Schumer to go to Amazon, buy a spine online, and bring this bill to the Senate floor. And the House will then pass it. Now, that's one person's opinion. I may be wrong, but I doubt it. Mr. Zuckerberg, let me ask you a couple of questions. Might wax a little philosophical here. I have to hand it to you. You have convinced over 2 billion people to give up all of their personal information, every bit of it, in exchange for getting to see what their high school friends had for dinner Saturday night. That's pretty much your business model, isn't it?
It's not how I would characterize it. And we give people the ability to connect with the people they care about and to engage with the topics that they care about.
And you take this information, this abundance of personal information, and then you develop algorithms to punch people's hot buttons, and send and steer to them information that punches their hot buttons again and again and again to keep them coming back and to keep them staying longer. And as a result, your users see only one side of an issue. And so, to some extent, your platform has become a killing field for the truth, hasn't it?
I mean, Senator, I disagree with that characterization. We build ranking and recommendations because people have a lot of friends and a lot of interests, and they want to make sure that they see the content that's relevant to them. We're trying to make a product that's useful to people and make our services as helpful as possible for people to connect with the people they care about and the interests they care about.
But you
And
don't
that's what we
show
do.
them both sides. You don't give them balanced information. You just keep punching their hot buttons, punching their hot buttons. You don't show them balanced information so people can discern the truth for themselves. And you rev them up so much that so often your platform and others becomes just cesspools of snark where nobody learns anything, don't they?
Well, Senator, I disagree with that. I think people can engage in the things that they're interested in and learn quite a bit about those. We have done a handful of different experiments and things in the past around news and trying to show content on a diverse set of perspectives. I think that there's more that needs to be explored there, but I don't think that we can solve that by ourselves. One of the things that I saw...
I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. President, but I'm going to run out of time. Do you think your users really understand what they're giving to you, all of their personal information, and how you process it and how you monetize it? Do you think people really understand?
Senator, I think people understand the basic terms. I mean, I think that there's... I actually think that a lot of people overestimate how much information
It's been
there
a
is
couple
that
of
we
years
have.
since we talked about this. Does your user agreement still suck?
I'm not sure how to answer that, Senator.
Can you still hide a dead body and all that legalese where nobody can find it?
Senator, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but I think people get the basic deal of using these services. It's a free service. You're using it to connect with the people you care about. If you share something with people, other people will be able to see your information. It's inherently, if you're putting something out there to be shared publicly or with a private set of people, it's, you're inherently putting it out there. So I think people get that basic part of how the service works.
But Mr. Zuckerberg, you're in the foothills of creepy. You track people who aren't even Facebook users. You track your own people, your own users who are your product, even when they're not on Facebook. I'm going to land this plane pretty quickly, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's creepy. And I understand you make a lot of money doing it, but I just wonder if our technology is greater than our humanity. I mean, let me ask you this final question. Instagram is harmful to young people, isn't it?
Senator, I disagree with that. That's not what the research shows on balance. That doesn't mean that individual people don't have issues and that there aren't things that we need to do to help provide the right tools for people. But across all of the research that we've done internally, I mean, the survey that the senator previously cited, there are 12 or 15 different categories of harm that we asked teens if they felt that Instagram made it worse or better. And across all of them, except for the one that Senator Hawley cited, more people said that using Instagram made the different issues that they face
Mr. Zuckerberg.
either positive or...
we just have to agree to disagree. If you believe that Instagram, I'm not saying it's intentional, but if you agree that if you think that Instagram is not hurting millions of our young people, particularly young teens, particularly young women, you shouldn't be driving. It is. Thanks.
Senator Butler.
Thank you all for being here. Mr. Spiegel, I see you hiding down there. What does yada, yada, yada mean?
I'm not familiar with the term, Senator.
Very uncool. Can we agree that what you do, not what you say, what you do is what you believe and everything else is just cottage cheese?
Yes, Senator.
You agree with that? Speak up. Don't be shy. I've listened to you today. I've heard a lot of yada, yada, yadaing. And I've heard you talk about the reforms you've made, and I appreciate them. And I've heard you talk about the reforms you're going to make. But I don't think you're going to solve the problem. I think Congress is going to have to help you. I think the reforms you're talking about to some extent are going to be like putting paint on rotten wood. And I'm not sure you're going to support this legislation. I'm not. The fact is that you and some of your internet colleagues who are not here are no longer, you're not companies, you're countries. You're very, very powerful. And you and some of your colleagues who are not here have blocked everything we have tried to do in terms of reasonable regulation. Everything from privacy to child exploitation. And in fact, we have a new definition of recession. A recession is when, we know we're in a recession when Google has to lay off 25 members of Congress. That's what we're down to. We're also down to this fact that your platforms are hurting children. I'm not saying they're not doing some good things, but they're hurting children. And I know how to count votes, and if this bill comes to the floor of the United States Senate, it will pass. Professor Myers, you are here at the invitation of my Democratic colleagues, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. In his opening statement, my good friend Senator Whitehouse said, I want to quote, reproductive justice is economic justice, close quote. Do you agree with that?
I might, as an economist, use the word rights, but yeah, I do agree with that.
Okay. That's not true for the baby, is it?
Well, first of all, I would refer to a fetus, not
Yeah,
a baby.
but that's, well, a fetus. I refer to it as a baby. That's not true for the baby, is it?
The evidence that I presented to you, Senator Kennedy, was evidence about measurable effects on the lives of women, families,
Right, I
and
got
children
that
who
part,
were
but that's
born.
not true for the baby, is it?
I'm sorry, I don't really understand
Well, it's
the
not
question.
true. Let me put it, let me be
Let
clear.
me
I'm
back
sorry.
up. As an economist, I measure effects using data. I'm not here to talk about ethics, assignment of personhood. That's not my
Well, but you
role.
said you agreed with the chairman's statement that reproductive justice is economic justice. There is no economic justice for the baby because the baby's dead, right?
I wouldn't refer. I don't really know how to answer your question. I would
You know,
I would refer to
was
a
the baby
fetus.
dead or alive?
We're referring to a fetus.
Okay, is the fetus dead or alive after an abortion?
The fetus would be dead after an
Okay,
abortion.
all right. If the mother is healthy and the baby is healthy, do you support abortion up to the moment of birth?
So I think that's a really hard question to answer because that just doesn't happen. You're asking me about something that simply doesn't happen.
Well,
I
it's
think-
legal.
I will tell you
it's
that-
legal. It's legal in Vermont, New Jersey, Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Alaska, and the District of Columbia, and the Loon wing of the Democratic Party supports abortion up to the moment of birth. So, do you support that or oppose it?
I don't think, let me say, I'm here to talk about the economics of abortion.
you're here as an expert.
And
I'm just asking you
I
what
think you're
you
asking me a
believe.
question as a person, which I'll answer as a person.
Okay, tell me as a person.
I will tell you as a person that I have ambivalence about abortion. I will tell you as a person, I haven't personally had an abortion. And I will also tell you as a person looking at the evidence around me and understanding how complex the decisions are that people face.
Okay.
I'm just simply uncomfortable
I got to move on,
thinking that there's a
Professor, 'cause I don't
simple
think you're
answer that
going to
applies
answer
to
my
everyone.
question.
I trust women and their healthcare providers.
It's real simple. You either support abortion for a healthy mother and baby up to the moment of birth, or you don't. And I don't think it's a difficult question. How about you, doctor? Do you support, if the mother is healthy and the baby's healthy, do you support abortion up to the moment of birth?
So, Senator, you're using really inflammatory language to talk about a medical procedure, and it's not a simple yes or no. Not to mention, when you make statements like that, you're erasing the grief and the trauma that my patients
You're not
are
going to answer my
through.
question either, are you?
It's not a question that
I
can
think
be answered
I
in
know
an
your
appropriate
answer.
way,
I think I
Senator.
know your answer. Mrs. Ford, okay? Let's take a baby at 21 weeks. Hold up, Mike. This is a baby at 21 weeks, okay? The baby can feel pain, right?
Yes,
And the baby's pretty developed, right?
yes.
And do you know the name of the procedure that the doctor would use to abort that baby at 21 weeks?
I'm not a doctor, but I believe it's a DNR,
It's called dilation and evacuation. Is that right?
as far as I understand, yes.
Yeah. And first, the doctor would dilate the cervix, and then the doctor would take what's called the doctor would call it a Sofer clamp. It's really a pair of pliers with sharp teeth on the end. And without giving the baby any pain medication, the doctor would go through the vagina, through the uterus, and start tearing the baby apart. Is that right?
As far as I understand the procedure.
Yeah, and she might start with the legs and pull them out, and the arms and pull them out, right? And then she might go for the heart or the spine and just pull the baby out piece by piece. Is that right? Without giving the baby pain medication.
That's what I understand the procedure to be.
Okay, but then you got to get the head out. The baby's dead, but maybe not. Maybe it's still in pain, but then you got to get the head out. And even with the cervix dilated, you got to get the head out, which is hard. So then the doctor would go in and use those pliers to crush the baby's head. Is that right?
As far as I
And
understand.
then she'd pull the head out, the crushed skull out, right?
Senator Kennedy, your time has expired here.
Well, you
and
gave
Senator
the
Stabenow is
others
waiting.
plenty of time, Mr. Chairman.
Just letting you know, your time's expired. You have
Okay.
other senators waiting.
Well, I was waiting when you were letting others. I'm sorry you don't want to hear about what happens.
No, I don't think anybody
in
else
an
is
actual
going- I don't think
abortion, but
anybody else
I
has gone
thought that
over.
was what we were here to talk about.
No one else has gone over. Some of the witnesses went a little bit long, but on both sides, so
I thought we were here
trying to
about
control that.
protecting mothers and killing babies.
I'm going to turn to Senator Stabenow and Mr.
I'm sorry
Phillips.
you
I'm
don't wanna
sorry that
hear it.
this had to take
Like we've
place
got
in
a
front of
whole
you.
roster here.
My apologies.
I know it's ugly, but it's
Thank
the
you,
truth,
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Rivera, if you were queen for a day and you had unfettered discretion to establish a national rule on abortion for America, what restrictions, if any, would you implement with respect to abortion?
Thank you for your question, Senator. I would, so the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists opposed restrictions that are not based on medicine, right? People need to be able to make their own reproductive health care decisions, and having arbitrary restrictions lead to the situations like we've been hearing about, like Kate Cox and others, who are not able to get the health care they need during obstetric emergencies. We know the majority of people access
Yes,
abortion
ma'am, but
services
maybe I
early.
wasn't clear,
Yes.
because I've got to ask each of our witnesses
Yes.
here. Just tell me, if you could implement any rule, what restrictions, if any, you would put on abortion.
Senator, arbitrary restrictions put women's health in danger.
So that means no restrictions?
Senator, healthcare needs to be driven by medical practice and medical
I
standards
agree.
of care.
You don't believe in any restrictions on abortion?
Healthcare needs to be driven by medical standards of care.
Well, your website says you support abortions at all gestations. So
That is correct, because
you support abortion
abortion needs
without
to be made
any
available
restrictions.
based on medical standards of care.
How about, could you get it, if the mother's healthy and the baby's healthy, would you support an abortion the day before birth?
Actually, that is not how abortion care works,
Yes, ma'am, but would you
Senator.
support that? You say
That's
no
called-
restrictions.
That is called labor and delivery, Senator.
But you support no restrictions.
That is not how abortion care works, and it's
Sure
really,
it does.
that is not how
My
abortion care
question's
works,
simple.
Senator.
Would you have a rule saying that if a healthy mother with a healthy baby wanted to have an abortion the day before birth, would it be okay with you?
Senator, that is not how abortion care works, and it's really dangerous. That rhetoric is really dangerous for the people who are
It would be
confronting
okay
these
with you, wouldn't it?
That is called labor and delivery, sir.
It would be okay with
That
you,
is called
wouldn't it?
labor and delivery, sir.
I find that astonishing.
Senator,
I noticed
that is
it
really
on your
offensive.
website,
That is really offensive
You
to the
issued a
people
press
needing
release.
to
You
access
don't
abortion
refer to
care.
mothers. You say at your organization, you don't refer to mothers. You call them birthing people. Is that right?
That is among the language that we use,
Yeah,
yes.
what's the difference?
A birthing person is someone who's in labor and delivery.
Okay, that's a mother, right?
So for sure, the majority of people who are pregnant are cisgender women, and at the same time, we have to acknowledge that trans people and non-binary people do and can become pregnant, and it's really important not to misgender them in law and health because it is really dangerous to them.
You were invited here by my Democratic colleagues today?
That is correct.
Okay. Dr. Denard, if you were queen for a day, what restrictions, if any, would you place on abortion?
Well, if I was queen for a day, I would use shared decision-making between myself and my patients so I could take really, really good care of them.
So you don't think there ought to be any restrictions?
You know, that's not really how abortion care works. We need to be able
Yes, ma'am,
to
but I'm
take
trying to
care.
understand your position first. Do you support any restrictions on abortion?
I support my patients, I trust women, and I know that they're going to make the right decision for themselves.
Okay. And you were invited here today by the Democrats?
Correct.
Okay. Professor Sneed. Well, let me back up. I don't have much time left. How would you change Texas law? Are you suggesting that Texas should adopt a law that's saying there should be no restrictions on abortion?
Are you asking me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. If I could change Texas's laws, I would be able to take care of my patients if they're in need without restriction.
I just find it extraordinary that neither you nor Ms. Rivera are willing to say what you believe, which is clearly that you don't think there ought to be any restrictions on abortion. You think it's okay. You want society to adopt a rule that says if a healthy mother with a healthy child wants to have an abortion, maybe she wants a different gender the day before birth, that's okay.
Senator,
you both seem, it's clear that's what you believe. Why won't you say it?
with all due respect, I've been to medical school. I've done multiple years of training, delivered babies, and done thousands of surgeries for over a decade. And you're describing a clinical situation that just doesn't exist, Senator.
No, ma'am, you're wrong. You're wrong, and you know I'm wrong. Do you perform abortions, doctor?
I am not an abortion provider.
Okay. Have you ever done an abortion?
I have never done an abortion, but I take care of my patients who are actively having miscarriages.
Okay. I think I'm over. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you,
course.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman. Mr. Schumacher, welcome. You were, who invited you here today?
I came with Protect Our Winters.
Right. But you're here on behalf of the Democrats or the Republicans?
I'm here on behalf of the outdoor enthusiasts around America.
Okay. You were contacted by Senator Whitehouse's staff?
I personally came with Protect Our Winters, so I don't know how that went exactly.
What is carbon dioxide?
I went to high school, but that's carbon dioxide is a gas.
Okay.
I'm not a professional to talk about carbon dioxide so much, but
Well, you want us to abolish it, right?
no, there's always going to be carbon dioxide.
Right. So what is it you want us to do? Let me back up, because I want to, I mean, you're here as an expert. Tell me more about what carbon dioxide is.
I'm here as an expert cross-country skier who sees the changes in my winters and the landscape that I live in Alaska. And so carbon dioxide is what I see it as is, it's a gas that exists in our atmosphere. And
Is it the major part of our atmosphere? Or?
It's a huge part of our atmosphere, yes.
It's actually a very small part of our atmosphere.
Well, okay. But, yeah, I don't know. What are you asking specifically?
Well, you said we need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. I'd like to know first if you know what it is. You want us to abolish fossil fuels?
I never said that.
You never have said that?
No.
Okay. What do you think we ought to do with fossil fuels?
What will we do with fossil fuels?
Yeah. Should we make any changes?
I would like to see a decrease in the use of fossil fuels. I think there's a possibility to use more electric generation.
Okay. Over what period of time? 10 years, 50 years, 100 years?
That's not, I would like to see it come as fast as possible while continuing.
How fast?
Sorry?
How fast?
I don't have a great answer for that, no.
Okay. You just think, well, how much will it cost for us to become carbon neutral in the United States by 2050?
I'm not a professional on that. I don't have an answer.
You don't have any idea?
No.
You just think we ought to spend the money?
I'm not an economist.
Yeah, but it's going to cost money. You realize that?
Yeah, but we've also talked about the trade-off of what the cost of climate change as emergencies will cost in the future also. So.
Right, but it's going to cost trillions of dollars to become carbon neutral by 2050, right?
I do not know.
You don't know. You just think we ought to do it.
I don't have a great answer for you, but I think
Okay.
I would.
If we spent those trillions of dollars and became carbon neutral by 2050 in the United States, which you advocate, how much will it reduce world temperatures?
I don't have an answer for that.
You don't know?
No.
You just think we ought to spend the money and then see what happens?
I think as an athlete, I think if we spend that money and invest in our future, hopefully those temperatures stop rising and maybe the snow at least stabilizes where it is for me. But yeah, I don't think anyone knows for sure. I don't know anyway.
Well, when my colleagues invite witnesses to come to us to tell us, advise us on passing legislation, I always check out the background of our witnesses because I like to know who I'm talking to. I checked yours out, Mr. Schumacher, and I want to be sure I understand it as I evaluate your testimony. On June 8, 2020, you tweeted, I'm going to quote, "The war on drugs was intentionally created to incarcerate black people en masse," end quote. The war on drugs, you said, was intentionally created to incarcerate black people en masse. Who intentionally created the war on drugs to put black people in jail? Who were you talking about?
I don't remember typing that.
You don't?
No.
It's on your Twitter feed.
Maybe a retweet. I don't know. I haven't used that in a while.
Well,
Also, it
even if
doesn't
it's a
seem like
retweet, it shows your support, right?
Maybe, yeah. But it's not the topic of this conversation. I think.
Right, but it has to do with, you're here giving us advice, and I just kind of like to know a little bit more about your point
Yeah,
of view.
I'm here as an athlete giving you my story and what I've seen in my field.
On August 27th of 2020, you tweeted this, quote, I'm going to quote, "Police are paid with taxpayer dollars. If they are not answerable to us, we can demand new service, and that's what this is. Abolish the police in favor of that new service," end quote. You think we ought to abolish the police, do you?
Again, not the topic I'm here to talk about today.
I know, but you tweeted it. Do you think we ought to abolish the police?
That's not what I'm here to talk about.
Should we do that before or after we get rid of fossil fuels?
I'm not going to address that.
You don't want to address it? Okay. Let me ask you about one more of your tweets. On August 26, 2020, you tweeted, there's a picture, I'm not going to describe the picture, but you said, quote, your words, not mine, it's on your Twitter feed, quote, "This is what systemic racism looks like. The Los Angeles Police Department is literally policing only the Black Lives Matter side," end quote. What do you mean by that?
This is still off topic.
No, it's not. You're here as an expert telling us, advising us, and I'm asking you about your background.
I'm here as an athlete to talk about the effects of climate change on my sport.
Okay, let's go back. Well, I'm almost out of time.
Senator, you're well out of time, and we have other senators waiting, so please
Okay.
wrap up when you have a moment.
All right. Thank you all for your testimony.
We have Senator Kennedy, then Chairman Wyden, and then Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Millen, is your expertise in the area, Mr. Bunn made this distinction, is your expertise in the area of tax avoidance or tax evasion or both?
I would say both. I think the lines, there are situations where the lines might get blurry, especially on the corporate side. But in my...
it's both?
It's both. In short, it's both.
Do you believe that there are major American corporations that are cheating on their taxes?
I think yes, there are cases where the transfer pricing regulations are not being followed, and Mr. Curtis's testimony speaks to that.
Who are they? Who are the five? Name the five American corporations that are the biggest tax cheats.
Well, this is a question for the IRS. It's their job to enforce the laws. So I wouldn't.
But that's a pretty serious allegation you made there, and I'm just asking you who they are.
There are cases pending against a number of companies until those cases conclude. It's not.
Who do you think they are? You're an expert in this area. I'm just asking you. You talked a lot, and I've read some of your writings about American corporations cheating on their taxes. I'm just asking you who they are.
I wouldn't use the word cheating. I think that they are taking advantage of the gray zone.
You used it in your testimony.
I'm sorry?
You used it in your testimony. I'm not trying to trick you. I just want to know you have been very vociferous in saying that American companies are cheating. Okay, that's America. You're entitled to your opinion, but you're an expert, and just tell me who they are.
I stand by that. I think that there is evidence to suggest that some of these companies and the IRS has pursued cases against a number of the companies that Mr. Curtis has analyzed, including Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and Coca-Cola.
Is Apple a tax cheat?
I wouldn't say tax cheat. I think that's putting it too strongly, and I didn't use that word.
Then who are they?
I wouldn't say tax cheats, but I think they are crossing the legal lines that have been set by Congress and by the IRS in the relevant regulations. And because the IRS is outgunned, they're not able to enforce the law against them.
Let me start over. Do you believe that there are major American corporations cheating on their taxes?
I believe they are coming very close to crossing the line, and it's difficult for IRS that is outgunned to enforce the line.
Are they crossing the line or not?
Well, it's up to the IRS to enforce the line if they don't have the resources.
I'm asking you your opinion. You're an expert.
I think there's a good case to be made that, yes, they are crossing the line.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Who are they?
That's up to the courts and the IRS to determine.
You made this allegation, but you don't want to say who they are? If you know who they are, you just don't want to tell us.
I think that's been explained by Mr. Curtis in his analysis.
I'm asking you to explain. You talk about tax cheats. I'm just asking you who they are, and you don't want to tell us?
It's again, I think it's for the IRS to enforce the line, and we need to make sure that the IRS is properly.
Well, do you have a list of these tax sheets?
No.
Okay. Have you been to the IRS and said, here are these companies and they're cheating on their taxes and I can show you how they're doing it?
No, I'm not. That's not I've never practiced in that area of law. I'm not a tax whistleblower lawyer.
All you've done is run around saying American companies are cheating on their taxes. I can't tell you who they are, and I haven't been to the IRS to show my data to the IRS, but I want you to believe me that they're cheating on their taxes. Is that your testimony today?
No, Senator, no.
It sure sounds like it.
I think that the case against some of these companies has been well documented in the
Which companies? Let me ask you one,
public.
because I'm going to run out of time. Tell me, in the last 23 seconds, here's your chance. You believe there are major American corporations cheating on their taxes. You just testified to that. I believe you told me yes. Tell me who they are.
I think there are the companies that Mr. Curtis discussed in his testimony.
Tell me who they are.
It includes some of the big tech companies. It includes some of the pharma companies that are.
Who are the 5 worst?
I don't have a ranking. I have not compiled.
You don't want to say.
I haven't looked into that.
You understand it makes it hard to believe your allegations if you won't tell us who they are. Talk's cheap. You ever heard that expression? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much.
You've actually done some investigation in this space.
With your cooperation.
People are expecting us to do it. That's why they want a trial on Mayorkas. And I think it is so wrong that Chuck Schumer is trying to table
I can't keep up with all the issues you're throwing at me, Senator. We came today to talk about solitary confinement in federal prisons, and I hope we can get back to that subject. At this point, Senator Kennedy is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry I was late. I was in another committee. I want to ask each of you this question, and if you would be mindful of the fact that I only have 5 minutes, so if you could each maybe give me a 1-minute answer. If a bill were before, and I want to talk about prisons, federal prisons in general. If a bill were before the Senate to abolish solitary confinement in federal prisons, what exceptions, if any, would you recommend that we include in that bill? Can we start down here?
Senator GAO would not make any recommendations until we've had an opportunity to review the bill.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. At this time, I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. Sir?
I would recommend that you follow what the Texas Commission on Jail Standards has done and follow the lead of Brandon Wood and the outstanding leadership that the state of Texas has taken.
What exceptions did they recommend?
There are some exceptions within there for minor infractions. There is a list of things that you cannot put people in solitary confinement for. I don't have a comprehensive list of it right now, but I'd be more than happy to obtain that for you. So we have over 600 points of compliance at local jails in the state of Texas that we must keep up. And so we work to ensure that we comply with all of those. And separation cells are one of the many things that we deal with. So, but I think if the federal government wishes to look at what the state of Texas has done, I think it would be beneficial if there is a problem.
Doctor?
Senator, I am here to talk about the health effects more so than the exceptions, but I would say that I would recommend looking to the alternatives to solitary confinement that already exist in multiple cities and states and potentially understand what exceptions they use to help inform your policy changes.
I must have asked a dumb question because I didn't get any answers. Let me try it another way. Are there any instances in the real world that we live in that, in your judgment, solitary confinement is appropriate? Doctor, we'll start with you this time.
Senator, your question builds off of what Chair Durbin had actually said earlier about who might need solitary confinement. I think for me as a health professional, what I find problematic is the current definition and use of solitary confinement of 22 hours a day.
Doctor, I appreciate that, but
I don't think that there are...
Can you answer my question?
Yes. Yes, sir. I don't think that there are uses of solitary confinement in its current iteration of 22 hours a day for anyone.
Okay.
I think that certain people need to be
Thank you
separated.
for being straightforward.
Yes, you're welcome.
I appreciate finally getting an answer. It's Sheriff, right?
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, are there any circumstances in your experience when solitary confinement is appropriate?
Yes, sir. I'll give you a list of some of the ones that are listed in the Texas Jail Commission. Interfering with a head count, in which we are required to do twice a day. Attempted escape.
So if someone interferes with the head count, that they should be in solitary confinement. They should
Yes,
be,
yes,
okay.
that's something that
what
they
else? I
can.
interrupted you. I just want to be sure I understand. What else?
Yes. So attempted escape, possession of weapon, attacking jailers or inmates, destroying security equipment within the facility. Those are all ones that are listed in the code for the state of Texas.
Okay. Are there any other?
Sometimes we use separation cells in order to separate gang members during times of unrest. Sometimes we utilize separation cells when somebody comes in initially in order to prevent them from talking with or intimidating other witnesses.
What do you mean by separation cells?
It's a single person cell. So we will put them in a single person cell so that they cannot intimidate any of the co-conspirators in a case. And I'll give you a good example being down on the border. Sometimes we'll
Can
arrest.
I ask you this? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
run out of time. I apologize, Sheriff. If a person's put in a separation cell, is that considered solitary confinement?
There is no such term in the state of Texas. It's separation cell, sir. So I guess based off of the definition that's been used here, I guess you would call it that. But we call it separation cell under our law.
Well, if the prisoner's put in a separation cell, does he have any contact during the day with other prisoners?
Yeah, they'll have vocal contact, yes, sir.
They'll have what?
They'll have vocal contact. In a jail setting, you're not going to have somebody that's isolated by sound. They also have access to publications. They also get access to phone calls, any of the correspondence that comes via the mail. They get exposure to sunlight, and they also get exercise every day.
Can I ask the other two witnesses the same question? Ladies? Are there any circumstances where you think solitary confinement is appropriate or necessary?
Senator, I just think that with lived experience, I think that no human being should be placed in solitary confinement.
Okay.
And Senator, as you know, GAO, these are policy decisions, And we evaluate any program's policies or practices, but we don't opine on policy decisions. So if it's something that you all put forward as policy, we're happy to review it.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I went over. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you for attending the hearing, Senator, and your questions. And I'd just say during the course of the hearing, we have used many terms interchangeably, and they are different, much different. Protective custody. You are separated, as the sheriff has mentioned, sometimes by your own choosing. I think what is different is most people in the corrections and incarceration don't want to use the term solitary confinement. It has an odious connotation to it, and so they use different terms, separation, administrative separation, and the like. I think how you're treated when you're in that cell is different under different circumstances. Ms. Davis described her situation to us earlier, and it was the classic solitary confinement with 1 hour or 2 hours out of your cell and no physical contact to speak of while she was incarcerated. That is what I imagine it to be, no matter what the title may be. Senator Booker?
Mr. Chairman, I can't tell you how grateful I am for this hearing.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Cohen, let me start with you. I think I'm going to ask a few questions. I think these are yes or no or I don't know questions. The last 3 years, unfortunately, the United States economy has experienced substantial inflation. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And
yes, sir.
That inflation is man-made, is it not?
Any inflation is man-made, sir.
And that man's name is Joe Biden, is it not?
Cannot answer that, sir.
Okay. Since President Biden took office, average electricity prices in the United States are up 29.4%, are they not?
I'll have to check the data and get back to you on that, sir.
And isn't it true that electricity prices have increased under President Biden, have increased 13 times faster than the previous 7 years?
I'll have to check the data, sir.
Okay. And the National Energy Assistant Directors Association. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I've checked them out. They're a reputable group. They say that the average United States electricity bill will go up 10% this year and 10% next year. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not familiar with the data, but I can point out, sir, that in Europe,
I'm not interested in
In Europe, prices are 2.5% to 3% higher.
I'm interested in our people right now who are having to,
who
are having to sell blood in order to pay their electricity bill.
Goodness.
A substantial portion of this inflation in electricity, up 30% since President Biden took office, is directly related to his energy policies. Is it not?
Energy prices fluctuate based on supply and demand of all sources of energy, yes.
I think it has nothing. Is that a yes or no?
It's a very complicated economic question.
Understand. Give me an answer. Did President Biden's policies contribute to the inflation or didn't they?
Both Republican and Democratic administrations infuse the economy with trillions of dollars, which contributes to the inflation,
Yeah,
yes.
I don't believe any Republicans voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Well, I do. $1.2 trillion, Green New Deal. No Republicans voted for it. You want to amend your answer?
I'll amend my answer that under President Trump and under President Biden, trillions of dollars were infused into the economy
under Trump,
and contributed
went
to
up 5%
inflation.
over 4 years, and under Biden they went up 30% over 3 years. Which is better?
Say again, under Trump, please.
Under Trump, electricity prices went up 5%. Under Biden, they went up 30% over 3 years. Which is better?
clearly lower rise in electricity prices better.
All right.
However,
Dr. Suprin, let me ask you a couple of questions.
okay,
You're here at the request of my Democratic colleagues?
no, sir.
No, Dr. Suprin.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Dr. Suprin, on December 14, 2023, you tweeted in support of climate defiance. That's an entity that the Brookings Institute has called a radical climate change group. Is that correct?
I don't recall, I'm afraid.
Okay. Would this be the same climate defiance that I'm looking at your tweet, you tweeted in support of them. Would this be the same climate defiance that called Senator Joe Biden, quote, a sick fuck?
I don't know, but as I
Would this
mentioned
be the same climate defiance that called Senator Lisa Murkowski a murderer?
I do not know. As I said in my statement...
Would this be the same climate defiance who told the CEO of Exxon to, quote, eat shit, Darren, close quote?
I'm not responsible for the statements of other
Nice
people.
group you're
and I also
hanging
do not know
around
the
with,
answer.
Doc. Here's what your tweet says, quote, we do, in support of climate defiance, we do not do online petitions. We do not do NGO coalition letters. We do not do fucking bus stop ads. We chase fossil fuel CEOs and the politicians who do their bidding, and we do not apologize, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
That is not my tweet, sir.
That is your tweet. I'm looking at it.
it.
Here's a copy right here. It's right off your website, Biggest Dallas. On
I'm almost
October
certain that is not
31,
my tweet, sir.
2023, you said this on Twitter. Quote, climate justice was coined by our movements to locate it as a struggle against genocidal racial injustice, colonialism, and apartheid. If your climate justice doesn't stand with the Palestinians against colonialism and apartheid, then your climate justice has no justice in it, close quote. Did you say that?
I believe not.
Here it is, bigger than Dallas.
May I please see the document?
Yes, sir, and the witnesses' documents there.
May I please
And
point out that this form
the
of...
senator's time has expired, and there are other senators waiting.
I've got a bunch more tweets. Thank you for your objective advice,
I'm sure you
Doc.
do. You can put them into a question for the record, and
Yes,
they'll
I'd
have
like to submit all of the good doctors' objective tweets and scientific analysis for the record.
That
Thank
will
you.
be done without objection. Senator Merkley.
May I clarify one final point?
Proceed.
These are not my tweets. These are retweets. It's an important
Oh, you
contradiction.
often retweet stuff you don't support? Is that what you're telling me, Doc?
I did not say that I don't support this. I simply did not tweet it, which, as you were
But you
alleging.
retweeted them,
I'd like
didn't
to
you?
make very clear that this form
You
of character
retweeted them,
assassination
didn't
is
you?
characteristic of the propaganda techniques
You
of fossil fuel interest.
retweeted
Senator
it,
Merkley.
didn't you?
Thank you.
Are you going to call me a sick fuck?
It's Senator Merkley's time.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Cohen, let me start with you. I think I'm going to ask a few questions. I think these are yes or no or I don't know questions. Last 3 years, unfortunately, the United States economy has experienced substantial inflation. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And
Yes, sir.
that inflation is man-made, is it not?
Any inflation is man-made, sir.
And that man's name is Joe Biden, is it not?
Cannot answer that, sir.
Okay. Since President Biden took office, average electricity prices in the United States are up 29.4%, are they not?
I'll have to check the data and get back to you on that, sir.
And isn't it true that electricity prices have increased under President Biden, have increased 13 times faster than the previous 7 years?
I'll have to check the data, sir.
Okay. And the National Energy Assistant Directors Association. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I've checked them out. They're a reputable group. They say that the average United States electricity bill will go up 10% this year and 10% next year. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not familiar with the data, but I can point out, sir, that in Europe,
I'm not interested in
In
Europe. I'm
Europe,
interested in
prices are 2.5% to 3%
our
higher.
people. I'm interested in our people right now who are having to.
Our people have,
Who are having to sell blood in order to pay their electricity bill.
goodness.
A substantial portion of this inflation in electricity, up 30% since President Biden took office, is directly related to his energy policies. Is it not?
Energy prices fluctuate based on supply and demand of all sources of energy, yes.
I think it has nothing, is that a yes or no?
It's a very complicated economic
I
question.
understand. Give me an answer. Did President Biden's policies contribute to the inflation, or didn't they?
Both Republican and Democratic administrations infuse the economy with trillions of dollars, which contributes to the inflation,
Yeah,
yes.
I don't believe any Republicans voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Well, I do. $1.2 trillion, Green New Deal. No Republicans voted for it. You want to amend your answer?
I'll amend my answer that under President Trump and under President Biden, trillions of dollars were infused into the economy
under Trump,
and
electricity
contributed
went
to
up 5%
inflation.
over 4 years, and under Biden, they went up 30% over 3 years. Which is better?
Say again, under Trump, please?
Under Trump, electricity prices went up 5%. Under Biden, they went up 30% over 3 years. Which is better?
Clearly, lower rise in electricity prices better.
All right.
However,
Dr. Super, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
You're here.
DACA, as we're talking about it. So if we extend and legalize DACA, that's the standard that's being used at this point. Senator Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the members of our panel for being here today. Ms. Nobles, I'm sorry. I don't have a daughter. I have a son. If what happened to your daughter happened to my son, I don't know if I could ever recover. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. I'm just sorry. Thank you. I don't know anybody in the United States Senate who has worked harder to implement and control, well, let me amend that, to implement an immigration policy that looks like somebody designed it on purpose than Senator John Cornyn. The problem we've had in the last 3 years is that except until recently, when it became a political issue, President Biden just didn't care. And sometimes when a person acts like he doesn't care, it's not an act. And that's why we have way more, Professor Wong, than 60,000 minors, many of whom are being trafficked, sexually trafficked today in our country. And I suspect you know that. Professor Wong, you're a professor from California, is that right?
Yes.
And you were invited here as an expert today by our Democratic colleagues?
Yes.
Okay. You're on the board of directors of the California Immigrant Policy Center. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And I'm looking at your website. You and the center believe, I want to quote, if that's okay. According to you and the center, quote, the immigration enforcement system is built on white supremacy, economic exploitation, and criminalization, and must be dismantled, end quote. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that statement.
Here it is, right from your website, and you're on the board of directors. Do you believe that our immigration system is built on white supremacy?
No, sir.
Well, you said it, Professor. Now, did you lie here, or are you lying to us today?
No, I did not write that statement. That I'm on the board of directors of an organization called the California Immigrant Policy Center that advocates for legislative changes in the state of California to improve the lives of immigrants. I'm not aware of that statement.
Well, you ought to go look at your website.
Are you talking about my personal website?
I'm talking about the California Immigrant Policy Center.
Yes, I'm not aware of that statement on the
board
California
you sit.
Immigrant Policy
You
Center's
say
website.
That the immigration enforcement system in America today is, quote, built on white supremacy.
That's not my statement.
Yes, it is.
That's not my statement.
You're on the board. It's built on economic exploitation, and it's built on criminalization, and it must be dismantled. You also say, you in the center, that you want to, quote, strategically push ICE out of our communities across California, end quote. Wow.
So an extensive body of research shows that interior immigration enforcement, to the extent that ICE partners with local police, has chilling effects across immigrant communities and their families.
Did you listen to Ms. Noble's testimony?
Yes, I did, with great concern.
Yeah. You think getting rid of ICE is going to help young women not be raped and murdered by MS-13 gang members? Is that your answer to
No, that's
bringing
not.
justice to Mrs. Noble's daughter? Is to call her a white supremacist and say that she believes in economically exploiting people?
No, that's not. You are attributing a statement to me that I did not make.
Yes, sir, you did. It's on your website.
Time has expired, Senator. I think it's inappropriate to call people liars in this hearing. I hope that we'll be very careful. The witnesses are under oath, and to say that they are lying is to accuse them of something close to a crime. And I think that term should be carefully used.
Well, can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
When you get I'm going to recognize.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, as you know, the pumps in our new storm protection system in New Orleans are corroding, and I know the Corps is working on it. Thank you for that. Who did we buy the pumps from?
Sir, it was a joint venture, a contractor.
Who was it?
Sir, I'll get you the specific names of the joint venture.
Well, are they going to stand behind their product?
Sir, we've reached a settlement agreement with the joint venture, and we will begin that work after hurricane season. The interim fixes on the remaining 4 pumps in the system will be complete by the 1st of June, so we'll have every pump available for this hurricane season. Okay. Then we'll go to work on the long-term repairs.
And you said you reached a settlement with your joint venture partner. I assume that's the pump manufacturer?
Yes, sir.
How much money are they putting up?
Sir, I can get you all. I don't have those details here.
Would you? I mean, they need to stand behind their project. This project's brand new, and the pumps are corroding. And I really would like to see more about the settlement that you worked out with them.
Okay. Yes, sir. We're going to deliver on a 35-year design life. That's our commitment to you.
Yes, sir. I want to ask you about another project, General. I know you're familiar with it. That's the elevator, grain elevator project in Wallace, Louisiana, by Greenfield, Louisiana. It's a $225 million project. It's not a petrochemical plant. It's a grain elevator project. We'll export grain. It's going to create about 100 new jobs, good jobs, about $75,000 apiece. The community wants it. The Planning and Zoning Commission in the community just approved the rezoning. But we've reached a point in this country where it takes longer to go to medical school, or it takes longer to get a permit for a project than it does to go to medical school. And when are we going to make a decision? The project needs a permit from the Corps. I'm not telling you what decision to make. This company's already spent $25 million, and they're going on, what, a couple of years? It's fish or cut bait time. Can you tell me when we're going to have a decision from the Corps?
Yes, sir. So soon. This is a controversial permit. There's parties for and against this particular project. So the current friction that we're working through, sir, is adherence to the National Historic Preservation Act, specifically Section 106, on 6 historic properties that are in the region. So we've got the information that we needed from all of our consulting parties. Colonel Jones is going through that now. He will make the decision, likely here very soon, on whether or not that needs to be elevated to the keeper of the registry of the National Register for decision. We expect to have that decision very soon.
Can I ask you a question, General? This is the Corps' call, is it not? I mean, I know if the historic preservation folks, they're entitled to input, but they don't have veto power, do they?
Sir, I don't know. Whether or not it gets elevated, I believe, is Colonel Jones's call.
Yeah, it's the Corps' call. And I know there's some people who don't want it. I understand that, and they're entitled to their opinion. But at some point, the Corps' got to make a decision. And you're not going to make everybody happy here. But time is money. And that's all I'm asking is that you go ahead and make a decision. Give me a quick update. Do I have any time left? Thank you, Senator Hoven. I love Hoven. Can you give me a quick update on the Morganza to the Gulf of Mexico project?
Yes, sir. Yesterday, we completed the initial NEPA work, designed the finding of no significant impact, and we completed the plans and specs for what we call Reach A. So that's the 5-mile gap on the southwest side of this 98-mile system. We'll get that contract out for solicitation next and intend to award a construction contract in July.
Okay. No, I got 35 seconds, Senator Hoven tells me. Quick update on the St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana feasibility study.
Yes, sir. I will take that chief's report briefing from the New Orleans district on the 28th of May. We'll sign that, and we'll get that to Congress for their consideration in Word of 24.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you. I know, but Senator Hoven can have my time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
What crime did you commit?
Second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder.
Okay. Who did you murder?
Jeffrey Owens.
Jeffrey Owen?
Yes, sir.
Why did you murder him?
I was a 16-year-old kid. Jeffrey, me and DeWan had a confrontation, and Jeffrey was an innocent bystander.
Okay. So you shot Jeffrey by accident?
Yes, sir.
You intended to murder somebody else?
I was defending myself against DeWan Lewis.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, you shot at Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
And you missed?
Yes, sir.
And you hit Mr. What was his name?
Mr. Jeffrey Owens.
Mr. Owens? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Owens have a mother?
I think everybody born in the world has a mother.
Yeah. But was his mother alive when
Yes.
you killed him?
She's still alive.
Okay. Did Mr. Owens have a father?
Yes,
Who was
sir.
alive when you killed him?
I don't know about his father's.
You never checked?
I mean, as a prisoner in Louisiana, you cannot check on those
Did
type of things.
Mr. Owens have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, he did.
Okay. How many?
I don't know.
Okay. You mentioned that your mother cried when you were sent to Angola. Do you know how Mr. Owens' mother felt? Have you ever reached out to them?
May I ask you a question, Senator?
Well, answer mine first.
I would answer yours.
Okay.
And you asking me questions that an incarcerated person cannot answer. I don't know what Jeffrey Owens' mother did, but human anatomy tells me that, yes, his mother had to cry because she lost a son that she brought into the world. Okay. Yes, his father, if he was living, he should have cried. His brother cried.
Did you ever reach out to Mr. Owens' family?
Sir, you're a senator from Louisiana. If a person like me that was incarcerated reach out to any person that's a victim, that's a sentence. You go to prison for that. And I was already in prison, so that's a different sentence.
So you couldn't
by law, you cannot reach out to the victim or the victim's family.
Well, I will tell you, I came today because I thought we were going to have and I hope we were going to have a rational discussion based on empirical evidence on a very complex, nuanced subject. Frankly, I'm disappointed. You know, Ms. Turner, Professor, I just don't think these emotional arguments are at all productive in us trying to solve a problem. People are in prison for a reason. I believe in free will. I get the impression that the ACLU position and the professor's position, I don't know about Mr. Wynn's position, is that you feel sorry for these folks who are in prison. I wish they weren't there too, but they're there for a reason that really hurt somebody. In Mr. Wynn's case, he murdered somebody. He actually killed somebody by accident. He meant to kill this person and he shot this other person. He could have killed two. And I'm kind of disappointed. And I just don't think we're going to solve this problem with emotional arguments from people who don't believe in free will and responsibility. That's just my point of view. But I thank you all for being here. And I'll say this, Professor, I was struck, Professor Armstrong, you keep talking about coercive context, that the prisoners are working in a coercive context. It's prison. Prison is a coercive context. And people are there for a reason. And I think you're in la-la land if you don't recognize that. Sure, you can respond.
Thank you so much. So I think the point is, in fact, that it is prison, but it is when prison is combined with being forced to work in certain environments that it can lead to dangerous conditions. And so I think about...
You have no empirical evidence of that.
I think that I do. So another life of mine is...
We can all cherry pick. I mean, people who work get hurt sometimes.
Yes.
Whether you're in prison or you're out.
Yeah.
Okay?
So I agree. What I'm talking about, and I think is really important to remember, is that our incredible system of justice will sentence somebody to a certain number of years. But what they're not sentenced to is to lose a limb or to lose a finger, because they're working on defective equipment that isn't subject to the same rules, simply the location of a printing press, whether it's behind the wall or something that is out in the free world. Its location should not determine to what extent it is a regulated piece of equipment.
And you make a valid point, but I've read some of your writings and some of your work, and I just get the impression that you almost think we shouldn't have prisons. That there is no free will. That people don't choose to commit crimes. And then if they do, they shouldn't be held responsible for them. And I just don't think you're entitled to that opinion. It's America. And,
I don't think I've written that anywhere.
To teach your kids that, but I just don't think I don't think most fair-minded Americans agree with you. And that's just my opinion. I'm happy to have discussion. I thank my friend Senator Booker for calling it. But you all seem to forget the fact that we're talking about prison, folks. And people are in prison for a reason. And they're there. No, ma'am, Ms. Turner, I'm going to have my say. I understand the ACLU position. I'm glad you're not in charge, because we'd have a lot more people hurt in this country.
I'd love to continue the conversation with you, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you. I yield back. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Turner, I want to be sure I understand your testimony. You think prison labor should be voluntary? Is that the ACLU position? Yes. Okay. And do you think, I'm
sorry, my microphone was off, if I may answer on my...
Yes, ma'am. Did you answer yes?
My answer is that the majority of incarcerated workers wish to work, but it is vital that that work be truly voluntary and that there is no place for forced labor in the United States. Yes.
Okay. And you think that prisoners who do work are underpaid? Is that the ACLU position?
They are underpaid or unpaid. In your state, many of those workers are unpaid.
Okay. Let's take a maintenance worker, which I assume includes people working in the kitchen. What do you think the starting pay ought to be in my state for a prisoner?
Workers should be paid the minimum wage of the state where they live. And there are true fiscal arguments in favor
minimum
of this.
Wage? Is that
minimum wage, yes.
Do you think prisoners should have a 401k?
I think that, my opinion is not what we're asking about. I'm here to provide information and context for the committee.
Do you think prisoners should be provided with a 401k?
If I may answer, the reality is that if we paid incarcerated workers a minimum wage, it would have net fiscal benefits for the United States.
I'm trying to ask you
workers would be able to pay.
About benefits.
Yes.
Do you think they should be provided with a 401k?
Workers should be eligible to earn into the social safety net. If they're paid minimum wage, workers will be able to earn into Social Security benefits to support themselves.
No?
That does not include a 401k, but I'm talking about basic social safety net.
Do you think prisoners should be entitled to paid vacation?
Workers should be entitled to workers' compensation when they're injured or maimed on the job, which happens all too often.
So they should be covered under our workers' comp law?
Yes, absolutely. Workers are working in dangerous conditions.
Should prisoners be allowed to unionize?
Yes.
You believe that too? Okay.
It's vital that workers
should prisoners be provided with health insurance, matched by their employer?
Workers should be covered by workplace health and safety guarantees. Incarcerated people.
What about health insurance?
Incarcerated people are already guaranteed a basic standard of health care. That is already guaranteed by U.S. law.
Health insurance.
They're already guaranteed that, even though the medical care they receive is usually substandard, and when they're injured or on the job, often receive substandard care. They are already guaranteed by law basic health care protections while incarcerated.
Mr. Wynn. Thank you, Madam Chair. Interesting questions. Mr. Maxwell, you're a farmer, is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Excuse me. You used to be a farmer, or you still are?
Yes, Senator, I grew up on a farm. I'm fourth-generation Missouri farmer.
Mm-hmm.
My brother does most of the farming. I do this activity more. I do have degrees in ag economics and a law degree. But I still actively farm. I've got over 100 ewes on the farm. We have hogs production. We're kind of the diversified, traditional family farm type operation. Lease out some of the land to the neighbor boy.
Yeah. Well, America was born on a farm, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Senator.
Dr. Owens, you talked about in order to commit a crime, you have to have means, motive, and opportunity. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you have suggested that it's not an optimal situation to have, well, strike that. Let me just get after it here. What crime are you accusing the 4 major food companies of?
Price gouging, sir.
Okay. You think they're price fixing?
In some cases, absolutely.
Okay. Name the 4 companies that you are accusing of price fixing.
In the grocery sector or more broadly?
The 4 you've been talking about.
I mean, so I think...
Name me every company that you think is price fixing in violation of the antitrust laws.
Yeah, I mean, so the most recent example that I think is worth considering is Agristats.
Yes, ma'am, but if you don't mind, we'll come back and do the examples. Name me the companies that you're accusing of price fixing.
Well, the first one is Agristats, which the Department of Justice has sued for price fixing.
Who else?
You know, in the grocery sector, we've got Walmart, we've got Kroger.
Walmart is price fixing.
No, I haven't accused them of price fixing. What I've said is that they're able to expand their markup.
Let me start over here. I want you price fixing is a serious crime, Doc. You can go to jail for that. And I want to be sure I understand your testimony. Who are you accusing of price fixing?
Yeah, look, what my testimony clearly states
is that... Tell me which companies you're accusing of price fixing. You said some were price fixing, and I want to know which ones.
Yeah, I mean, look...
I may report them myself.
The company that's absolutely under investigation by the DOJ
Which ones are price fixing?
I think the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice should take a close look at the 4 major grocers. They should take a close look at the 4 major meat packers.
There are currently
there's pending litigation.
Which companies are price fixing?
Tyson is a great example. Tyson, the large meat packer.
Okay, who else?
The big 4 meat packers are all
currently
That's
one. Who else?
Like I said, I think looking at the 4 major grocers makes sense in this setting.
Which 4 are price fixing?
Walmart, Albertsons,
Walmart's price
Kroger.
Fixing. Wait.
I didn't say they were. I said taking a look.
You just said they were. You can't come here and say and imply they're price fixing and then say they're price fixing. That's a serious allegation. You can be sued for defamation.
I said we should take a close look at the companies.
Let me go back. I want to be sure I understand your testimony. Are you telling me right here today that you're accusing Walmart of price fixing?
I'm not personally accusing Walmart of price fixing. I am suggesting
Who are you accusing of price fixing? That's a serious charge.
Neither my written testimony nor my oral testimony makes explicit legal claims.
So you're not accusing anybody of price fixing?
No, I have pointed out that the Department of Justice is currently looking at price fixing by Agristats.
Price fixing? Why won't you answer my question? Who are you accusing of price fixing?
I'm pretty sure I have answered your question.
No, you haven't. Just tell me the names of the companies, one by one. What's the first company that you're accusing of price fixing?
I've mentioned Agristats is currently
what?
Agristats.
All right, who's number 2?
I said Tyson's is currently under investigation for
price fixing.
Yeah.
Who's number 3?
I've also said that I think the Department of Justice and the FTC should take a close look at
number 3?
Major grocery
Who's number
retailers.
3? Is Walmart price fixing?
I think that they should take a look at
Is Walmart price fixing?
They should take a look at it.
Is Walmart price fixing?
I can't currently answer that question. I said that the Department
You won't
of
answer
Justice,
that question.
No, I
How
said
about
that
Albertsons? Is Albertsons price fixing?
the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission
Is Albertsons price fixing?
should take a close look at that.
Is Albertsons price fixing?
Again, I think the Department of Justice should take a close look.
You don't want to say.
No, I mean, look, I'm not at the FTC. I'm not at the DOJ.
Yes, ma'am, but you've accused these companies of breaking the law, and I think that you ought to have the courage to say in front of God and country what you believe. Now, you either do or you don't.
Look, I believe that when companies get larger and larger,
I understand
and larger,
what you believe,
it
but I
becomes
understand
easier and easier.
You're waffling
to
like a
coordinate
bank catfish. Okay,
it's easy to coordinate price hikes
Dr.
when you're
Antoni,
large and there are
Dr.
fewer
Antoni,
companies.
I think it's been well established that if we discovered life on Mars tomorrow, Joe Biden would send it money. To what extent has his deficit spending contributed to inflation? And Do you know of any of these companies? Would you care to accuse someone of a crime here today? And if anybody else would, just let me know. If somebody is price fixing, I want to know. I'll report them myself. And I'm going to want to see your evidence. Otherwise, you subject yourself to defamation. But let me go back to my original question. What was it, Mars? Was it Mars or Jupiter? I forgot. Is the amount of money that President Biden has insisted on spending contributed to inflation? Duh. What's your answer to that?
Well, Senator, regarding the price fixing, I have no evidence because there is no evidence of that, so I can't provide that to you. But to answer the hypothetical on Mars, absolutely that would add to inflation. And yes, the deficit spending under this president, but really under any president, it doesn't matter that it's Joe Biden in particular in the White House doing it. Any person who did, if any person did what he did, it would have the exact same effect, which is this massive run-up in prices, because again, it's not that things are more valuable, it's that the dollar is worth less. So it takes more dollars to buy exactly what you used to. And if you look at, again, the Biden administration's own data, these aren't my figures, these are figures from the Biden administration. They show that prices paid by businesses and prices paid by consumers have gone up almost exactly the same, about 19% during his tenure. And so this idea that somehow the prices that consumers, that that all of the people that you represent are paying are somehow the cause of anything other than costs simply being passed on to them, the data simply don't support that.
Okay. How about you, Doc?
Excuse me. No evidence. No, I'm not accusing anyone of price fixing.
Are you a lawyer by chance?
I'm sorry?
Are you a lawyer by chance?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Just an economist.
Okay. What happens if you accuse somebody of price fixing and they didn't do it?
I probably don't want to be that person.
You got good insurance?
Yeah. No, I'm not. Not doing that.
Okay. Go ahead.
As far as the fiscal stimulus stuff, that's a standard economic model. And you can go back and look, multiple people, Olivier Blanchard is one, some of the upper bound estimates on how big the shortfall in demand was after COVID and the shutdowns. So like one of the largest upper bound estimates that I've seen is about $680 billion, just the COVID package of 1.9 trillion. That's already almost 3 times the size of that. So that's,
You want to go now?
Sure.
All right.
Let the record reflect that the senator from Louisiana is far more loquacious than the Baptist preacher.
And that's a high standard.
That's
Senator
my friend.
Warnock.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Guys, hey,
Dr.
when you're
Antoni,
large and there are
Dr.
fewer
Antoni,
companies.
I think it's been well established that if we discovered life on Mars tomorrow, Joe Biden would send it money. To what extent has his deficit spending contributed to inflation? And do you know of any of these companies? Would you care to accuse someone of a crime here today? And if anybody else would, just let me know. If somebody is price fixing, I want to know. I'll report them myself. And I'm going to want to see your evidence. Otherwise, you subject yourself to defamation. But let me go back to my original question. What was it, Mars? Was it Mars or Jupiter? I forgot. Is the amount of money that President Biden has insisted on spending contributed to inflation? Duh. What's your answer to that?
Well, Senator, regarding the price fixing, I have no evidence because there is no evidence of that, so I can't provide that to you. But to answer the hypothetical on Mars, absolutely that would add to inflation. And yes, the deficit spending under this president, but really under any president, it doesn't matter that it's Joe Biden in particular in the White House doing it. Any person who did, if any person did what he did, it would have the exact same effect, which is this massive run-up in prices, because again, it's not that things are more valuable. It's that the dollar is worth less. So it takes more dollars to buy exactly what you used to. And if you look at, again, the Biden administration's own data, these aren't my figures, these are figures from the Biden administration. They show that prices paid by businesses and prices paid by consumers have gone up almost exactly the same, about 19% during his tenure. And so this idea that somehow the prices that consumers, that that all of the people that you represent are paying are somehow the cause of anything other than costs simply being passed on to them, the data simply don't support that.
Okay. How about you, Doc?
Excuse me. No evidence. No, I'm not accusing anyone of price fixing.
Are you a lawyer by chance?
I'm sorry?
Are you a lawyer by chance?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Just an economist.
Okay. What happens if you accuse somebody of price fixing and they didn't do it?
I probably don't want to be that person.
You got good insurance?
Yeah. No, I'm not. Not doing that.
Okay. Go ahead.
As far as the fiscal stimulus stuff, that's a standard economic model. And you can go back and look, multiple people, Olivier Blanchard is one, some of the upper bound estimates on how big the shortfall in demand was after COVID and the shutdowns. So like one of the largest upper bound estimates that I've seen is about $680 billion, just the COVID package of 1.9 trillion. That's already almost 3 times the size of that. So that's...
You want to go now?
Sure.
All right.
Let the record reflect that the senator from Louisiana is far more loquacious than the Baptist preacher.
And that's a high standard.
Turn row. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Our ranking member has returned from the vote, and I turn to him.
I apologize to some of our witnesses. I had to leave to go vote. Professor Sneed, I find your area of expertise and research to be very interesting. It seems to me there are 2 options, and if there are others, I hope you will school me. With respect to abortion, one option is to have a federal rule that applies to every American. Under the current status of the law, in order to have a federal rule, more likely than not, Congress would have to pass it. Or we would have to amend the Constitution, since the United States Supreme Court has ruled that abortion is not addressed in our Constitution. The second option, of course, is to let the American people decide on a state-by-state basis. There are at least 2 ways that people in a state can decide. One is through their elected representatives, the state legislature. The other is through a public referendum. Are there any other options other than those?
Well, not if the people are the ones doing the deciding. We saw for almost 50 years what happens when a court decides to constitutionalize the question and takes the matter away from the political sphere, in which one has to live with whatever that court decides. You could Roe v. Wade's one model. You could imagine another model in which a court imposes restrictions on abortion by virtue of interpreting whatever the constitution of that state or sovereign country happens to be. But if the people are to decide, it could either occur in the ways that you described, namely through the federal political branches. Now, there's an interesting question about what the scope of Congress's authority is to regulate the practice of medicine in the states. You'd have to find an enumerated power. Maybe it's the commerce power, something like that. But it's not an obvious source of authority in the Constitution to regulate the plenary authority of the states and override their decisions to regulate the practice of medicine. So what we see most often is the states themselves pursuing what's been described as a patchwork, whatever is consistent with the values and of the people of that state, whether it be through their representatives or through by direct referendum.
Let me ask you this, because I'm particularly interested in your analysis of this tough issue from an ethics perspective. Some of my colleagues believe, and indeed in my opening statement I alluded to some legislation that some of my colleagues are supporting. They believe that we should have a federal rule that applies to every American that says it is solely the right of the mother. The mother has the unfettered discretion to decide when, if ever, to undergo an abortion. What ethical considerations does that present?
Well, the principal ethical question that is under consideration in this whole context is how do the various competing goods relate to one another? I've heard a lot of folks talk about the goods of autonomy and freedom and the pursuit of well-being and health care on the one hand. Others.
Let me put it another way. Excuse me
yes.
for interrupting. I was maybe a little abstract. Let's suppose that a mother presents at 34 weeks and says, clearly past the point of viability for the child, and says, I have decided I don't want to have this baby. If I'm being honest, I don't want to have this baby. And it is going to cause me enormous emotional distress to have this child. I'm just not ready. And she's sincere. She's really thought about it and said, I'm just not prepared to have this child, and it will affect me emotionally. And I want an abortion. What are the ethical considerations presented by that situation as opposed to the ethical considerations if any presented by an abortion within the first 6 weeks of a pregnancy?
Well, I would say that the principal ethical question when you're talking about what it sounds like you're describing, legally speaking, would be termed an elective abortion, not an abortion necessary to preserve a woman's life or health. And that is principally, incidentally, that is principally what the social science evidence suggests. Late-term abortions are principally for situational, circumstantial reasons, not for instances of health and safety or even fetal abnormality, according to experts like Warren Hearn and other social science studies that have been undertaken. But the principal ethical question in any of these instances is, what is the moral, ontological, and legal status of the unborn child? What you're talking about is the proposal to take the life of an independent human being for the sake of the goods that you are describing, to preserve emotional well-being, to preserve a woman's mental peace or her socioeconomic peace. That's the ethical question. That's what's so, in some ways, impoverished about our public debate. We hear one side talking about one aspect of the issue, the goods of autonomy and health care and so on, and the other side talking about the ontological, biological, and moral status of the unborn child, but the talking is going past one another. No one is, as far as I can tell, engaging all of the different dimensions of the debate, which I think is essential for wise and humane self-governance. No matter what your position on abortion is, you should at least take seriously the other side's perspective. And that's what's missing, I think, from our public debate. And I'm not talking about my colleagues here on the dais, but our public debate would benefit from a more comprehensive conversation about what the competing goods are.
With my chair's permission, I'm going to see if anyone else wants to weigh on this. Let me present the situation again, because this is a tough case. A situation where 34th week, the mother says, I've decided I don't want to have this baby. And it will affect me emotionally. I just don't want the child. Should the mother, at that juncture, have the right, clearly a viable child, to abort the child? And who should make that decision? And how do you represent the child's interest at that point? Who represents the child's interest at that point? Now, that's a tough question. Would anybody else like to weigh into that, on that? Mr. Matto, my eyes are terrible.
Mr. Matto-Zimmet.
Mr. Matto-Zimmet?
With all due respect, I don't think these kinds of hypotheticals really
Yeah,
reflect...
don't tell me that.
I
mean,
don't think they reflect the
you
reality
just
of abortion
you just
care in this
dodging
country.
the question. You're just dodging the question.
I don't think that there's a point...
That's what
Witnesses actually get to answer the question.
that's what your side always says. Now, that's not my example's not unrealistic.
I think that
if your answer, I'm going to save my time. If your answer is going to be that never happens, let me go to Ms. Fry. What do you think?
Well, Senator, first of all, if you don't ask a question if you don't want to know the answer, and I think 1%. But I'm saying to you, Senator, 1% of abortions happen at 21 weeks or later. Mm-hmm. So I think the premise of your question sets up a conversation about abortion that is unfair. It is rarely is that ever the instance. The vast majority of pregnancies and abortions that are considered late in a pregnancy have to do with severe, devastating medical circumstances. And I understand your point, Senator. I understand your point. But with all due respect, I also think the chances of people sort of getting all the way through a pregnancy and just sort of saying, I don't want it, is disrespectful to women.
Well,
the majority of women who are getting abortions are already mothers, Senator.
That's the case,
they respect their kids.
I'm really trying to have a discussion. But that is the alternative I presented is very realistic. I'm not saying it happens 1,000 times today, but that's where the rubber meets the road. And the answer I always get is, well, that never happens. Well, you don't know that, and I don't know that.
But I think the difference, what I would say, Senator, is making a rule.
Let me finish my thought. What I'm saying is, if it's not a problem, then why wouldn't we make everybody happy by saying, I'm not recommending this, I'm asking the question, then why wouldn't we just say, okay, if you say it's not a problem, then what's the problem with saying after a certain number of weeks you can't have an abortion? Let me talk to Dr. Scott. You heard my example, okay?
We're now well into Senator Blumenthal's time.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
wrap up at your time.
Can I get the doctor's answer? I didn't see Dick come in, I'm sorry.
Well, I would just say that we don't keep very close eye on what's going on in the abortion industry in this country. There are at least 5 abortion facilities that have no gestational limits on the abortions that they will do. So they will do an abortion on request. The woman that you described clearly needs mental health counseling. She clearly needs support. It is highly likely she is being coerced into that decision. The data that we have on late abortions,
But what if she's not? What if she is honestly...
You're really into Senator Blumenthal's time now. You can have the witness answer the question, but then it's not your time any longer.
What if she's not? What if she hadn't been coerced?
This is
your
quite
time any longer. Let her finish, and I'll recognize Senator Blumenthal.
This is quite a dangerous abortion for her, and that child is definitely capable of feeling pain as he is dismembered. So as a moral society, we should absolutely say no. We're not going to let that opportunity for that late abortion to happen, and we should be willing to set some limits.
Senator Blumenthal.
Dr. Schierholtz, appreciate your testimony. Dr. Toussaint.
Good afternoon, Chair Warren, Ranking Member Kennedy, and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here, and I thank you for inviting me to discuss my experience with non-compete agreements from a doctor's perspective. My name is Will James Toussaint, and I'm an orthopedic surgeon at the University of Florida as of 2022. And I'd like to state for the record that the opinions expressed herein are my own and do not reflect the positions of UF or UF Health. I was born in Haiti and immigrated to Florida, where I achieved the American dream. I was the first in my family to be accepted to college. I worked on Wall Street after college to pay off my student loans. I was then accepted to medical school, where I graduated among the top of my class, and as a result, I matched at Harvard University's orthopedic surgery residency program and then completed an orthopedic foot and ankle fellowship. In 2014, I joined a private practice group in North Central Florida as their only foot and ankle trained orthopedic surgeon. I was one of only 2 surgeons with this expertise across a dozen mostly rural counties serving over 850,000 people. Over the next few years, my partners and I felt the pressures of decreasing reimbursement coupled with the burdens of pre-approval requirements from insurers and competition from other practices. We felt that an infusion of capital was necessary to remain sustainable. As a result, we entered into a purchase agreement with a private equity company headquartered in California. The deal closed in 2017. Although I cannot disclose the transaction's details, there was indeed a non-compete clause. Per the non-compete clause, I would be restricted from practicing orthopedic surgery within 25 miles of any facility in which the group was currently providing medical services, any facility in which the group had previously provided medical services, any facility in which the group was targeted for expansion within the entire state of Florida, and any facility the group was in discussions with related to a potential acquisition. This non-compete was valid for 2 years, and of course, the group was located in multiple states. One might wonder why we would sign such a deal. The reality is that the nuances of the non-compete were not known until we, the doctors, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in transaction expenses related to the acquisition. We felt backed into a corner and believed that our only choice was to proceed with the transaction in good faith. Unfortunately, within months after closing the deal, the morale of the physicians and the staff declined. Instead of cost savings, the practice's overhead expenses increased significantly due to more layers of administrators, excessive management fees, and millions of dollars of debt expenses. The overhead increased so substantially that some physicians not only did not receive a paycheck, but actually paid to work. Despite the physicians taking on all the risks of patient care, all the while the cost of the patients started to rise and they complained that their quality of care decreased. Personally, I became disillusioned by management focus on dollars instead of the quality of care. I eventually put in my resignation stating my intent to leave for academic practice at the nearby nonprofit public institution. This decision made sense given that the only other orthopedic foot and ankle surgeon in the entire region was retiring, and I would be able to help educate the next generation of doctors. Despite this, the private equity group filed suit against me. It did not matter to the private equity group that a community of over 850,000 people would not have a specialist surgeon to care for them. It also didn't matter to the private equity group that the university was the only contracted provider of orthopedic care for Medicaid patients in the community, and without me, they would have to travel hours away for care. And finally, it did not matter to the PE group that the state of Florida had already enacted a special statute, Chapter 542, Section 336, stating that if one entity employs all the doctors within a special specialty in the county, that the non-compete is already void. It didn't matter to them. Despite all of this, within days of my leaving the practice, the private equity group threatened legal action to prevent me from entering academic practice. Despite the aforementioned Florida statute negating the non-compete, the private equity goals were clear: to wage a prolonged legal battle in the hopes that I would give up and leave my community before a final judgment was made. After an expensive 4-month dispute, a legal settlement was finally achieved and I was able to join the university. Not surprisingly, many patients from my previous practice told me that they were very frustrated when they called the group asking for me. They said that the private equity group lied to them and stated that I had retired from medicine, which is clearly untrue. Because of my concerns with private equity in healthcare, including their use of non-compete agreements, I joined the Coalition for Patient-Centered Care, a group of healthcare stakeholders who oppose private equity's influence over independent physicians. I have experienced the negative consequences of non-compete agreements have on patients, the physicians, and their communities. And I conclude that these restrictive covenants negatively impact patient access to physicians, limit the quality of care, and increase costs to all parties. Thank you.
Dr. Toussaint, you're an orthopedic surgeon, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Where'd you go to med school?
I went to medical school at NYU, sir.
Okay. And you were, I think you said you were at the top of your class.
Yes, sir.
And then you trained at Harvard.
That is correct.
And then you joined other orthopods in a practice, right?
That is correct.
How many orthopedic surgeons were in your class? Were in your practice, rather?
I don't recall the number of orthopedic surgeons specifically, but there were approximately 25 partners within the group.
And you were a partner?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And a private equity company came in and said they wanted to buy you. Is that right?
That is correct.
And you and your partner sold, right?
That is correct.
And they paid you a bunch of money, right?
They paid me some money, sir. That is correct.
Yeah. How much did you walk away with?
I walked away with nothing.
No, when they bought your practice, you were a partner. You were paid, right?
Right at that point, sir, I did not walk away, but I was.
Well, I didn't strike the walk away. How much did you personally gain from the sale to the private equity group?
I'm not allowed to disclose the details of the transaction, sir.
Was it over? Why not?
Because that is part of the transaction's restrictive agreement, sir.
Was it over $1 million?
I'm not allowed to say, sir.
Was it over $2 million?
I'm not allowed to say the amount.
It was a
sir.
lot of money, though, wasn't it?
I do not believe it was worth my freedom, sir.
But you did at the time.
I did not, sir.
Okay. Why'd you sign the agreement?
Because it was, for the lack of a better term, I was compelled to sign the agreement in order to fall in line with the group, sir.
Here's why I think you signed the agreement, and I don't mean to offend you.
It's okay.
I've seen these kind of transactions before. This is going on all over the country.
That is correct.
I think the private equity group came in and offered you and your partners a huge sum of money in the millions. And I think you took it. And I think later you regretted it. And you wanted out of the deal. And I think that's violates the freedom of contract. And I will bet, no offense, doctor, but I will bet that you wouldn't be willing to give back the millions of dollars that you took away from the sale in order to get back your freedom to practice.
Can I respond?
Sure.
If I may respond, thank you for the opportunity to respond to your question, sir. I have to say that, number one, I was not in favor of the sale. That's number one. And then number two, I have to disagree with your final statement without giving away any details. But I can say in my personal experience that is false, sir.
Okay. You took the money, though, didn't you?
The thing that I disagree with, sir, is whether or not I gave it back.
Yeah, but did you take the money?
I gave it back, sir.
You gave back all the money that the private equity group paid you.
As part of the...
Is that your testimony?
As part of the settlement, I have to say that I had to buy out of the non-compete.
Yeah, I don't want to play GameStop, but
yes, sir.
When the private equity guys came in and said, we want to buy you out, you might have disagreed with your partners, but it sounds like they outvoted you.
That's correct.
You could have left the practice then. You chose not to. You chose to take the money, did you not?
If I chose to leave the practice, sir, I would have had to leave the state.
I get that. But you took the money, did you not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Doctor, let's suppose that Elon Musk decided to leave Tesla. General Motors hired him away. Said, we'll pay you $50 billion a year because we, General Motors, are sucking wind. And they are. But if we sign you up, we want an employment contract, and we're going to show you all our intellectual property. And we're going to insist that you sign a non-compete agreement. Now, you got General Motors, you got Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, people in the world. Why should those two not be allowed to negotiate an employment contract, including a non-compete agreement?
As I explained to Ms. Smith, I'm less worried about wage-suppressing effects of non-competes on very high-wage workers. Obviously, Elon Musk would be able to negotiate a non-compete with a new employer.
Would you have any problem saying that's okay?
There are other options for
but
GM.
would you have a problem?
I would have a deep problem with saying that's okay because
You're just against all non-competes.
Because of their effects on the economy, their negative effects on workers, negative effects on consumers, and negative effects on the economy more broadly.
I just don't think you're very objective. I don't think You're a very objective witness. It's been my experience that most of these issues, there are always two sides. And no offense, you're entitled to your opinion. I enjoyed listening to you, but I can tell from your breathless presentation that you just feel passionately about this, and I respect that, but I think you're kind of blinded by your ideology. That's just my point of view. But I thank you for being here. And I went way over. Give Tina more time. Because she stayed within her limits, and I went way over. And I got to go vote.
All right. Thank you. So nearly 30 million people.
The American people, frankly, bribe the American people to get rid of the gas car and drive an electric car. Can any of you give me a figure?
Yes, Senator, the Treasury Department reports we spent about $1 billion year to date. So for the first half of this year, so roughly $2 billion this year.
We're behind.
As I noted,
how much do you think it'll cost, Doctor? You're a doctor,
so
right?
$2 billion this year is what the estimate from the Treasury Department.
How much do you think it will cost for us to, let's say, get 75% of these 200?
How much will it cost American consumers to remain?
How much? Do you know how much it'll cost, Doctor?
No one knows the future with certainty, Senator.
Right. You just think we ought to keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot.
I think we ought to set a stable policy framework that allows American consumers to become familiar with the environment and American businesses to innovate and to compete within that stable framework. That's what I said
And how
earlier in
much
my
will
testimony.
that cost?
Will cost less than the benefits delivered by the
You don't
policy.
care how much it costs, do you?
I care if the benefits exceed the costs. I don't care about the costs.
You
These are
don't care how
investments
much
in the
it
public.
costs, do you?
I care very much how much it costs. As long as the benefits exceed the costs, that's an investment worth making.
Well, so, okay.
How much
So-
does it cost to seed the industries of the future to China?
I get to ask the questions, Doc.
Sorry.
You're at Princeton, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How are Jewish students doing at Princeton? Are they feeling better?
No, that has
more
nothing to do with the hearing today. I'm
I
not going
didn't
to
think
comment on
you'd
that.
want- I didn't think you'd want to talk about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. Ms. Umberger, you were in a Georgia state prison.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And Ms. LeBoy, am I saying your name right?
Yes, sir.
Your daughter was in a state prison?
Yes, York Correctional.
And Georgia?
York Correctional in Connecticut.
In Connecticut.
In Niantic, Connecticut,
Okay.
yes.
Well, I want to thank both of you for coming. It's, I mean, your testimony was instructive, but that sounds kind of sterile when you put it that way. It was also moving. I know these four colleagues well. Hope we'll have another hearing on this subject. I would like to sit down with them and others and try to figure out how to address this problem. Yeah. I've had this discussion with Senator Booker before. I think we need to address the issue of solitary confinement in our prisons. We need to involve law enforcement. I'm hoping in another hearing we'll offer the Georgia state officials the chance to come in and tell us what happened here and offer constructive suggestions. I guess what I'm saying is I pledge to you to try to sit down and let's see if we can address this problem. I'm going to have to leave in a second. I don't want you to be offended by that. We've got a vote going on. Dr. Suffren, tell me your credentials again.
I'm a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist, and I also have a doctoral degree.
Yes, ma'am. And you're a professor?
I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins University.
And the medical school? Or?
In the School of Medicine and at the School of Public Health.
Okay. You're a chaired professor? Or?
I am not.
Okay. All right. But you represent, or you are a part of the Johns Hopkins system?
I am,
Yeah.
but I'm not representing Johns Hopkins today.
Understand. Well, if we're going to solve this problem, we've got to be candid with each other. Do you have a Twitter account?
Thank you, Senator, for your question, but I'm here today to talk about my expertise on reproductive health care for incarcerated women.
Is your Twitter account jail care?
That is thank you, Senator. That is a Twitter account that is associated with a book that I published in 2017. But I'm really here today to talk about my expertise on reproductive health care and pregnancy care for incarcerated women.
On September 29th of 2018, at 3:33, I'm going to read you one of your tweets. These are your words, not mine. Quote, Piper reminding us that gathering to discuss ending incarceration of women girls. Piper reminding us that gathering to discuss ending incarceration of women and girls is anecdote to white supremacist Kavanaugh shit show. Professor, did I read that correctly?
Thank you for reciting that. I'm really here today to talk about research and improving conditions for incarcerated pregnant women.
Were you speaking for Johns Hopkins when you sent this out?
I was not speaking for Johns Hopkins.
Well, I'd like to solve this problem, Professor. But we're not going to solve it with that kind of attitude. Thank you, ladies, for being here. I appreciate the courage that it took to come forward today.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
As tempted as I am, Dr. Suffren, to take the bait.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all our witnesses. I'm sorry I was late. I was in another committee. How many of you drive an electric car, own an electric car? Okay. You gentlemen don't?
If you mean electric by a battery electric, no. If you mean plug-in electric, yes.
Okay. Of the three folks who raised their hands, how many do you own gasoline-powered cars at all? No?
No, Senator.
No, all electric. Okay. Let me ask you all this, and please give me brief answers, because there are five of you, and there's only one of me. Okay? If electric cars are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
The upfront costs of an electric vehicle are about $10,000 higher today than they are for an equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle today, but that cost is declining substantially. Right. And so this is a temporary intervention to help the auto industry strategically compete in global markets and to transition as battery costs fall.
You didn't hear my admonition, okay?
Sorry.
Doc, how about if electric vehicles are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
I think sorry, Senator, I'll step away from.
I'm sorry, I can't see the names.
Oh, it's Gross, Ms. Gross here. I'll defer to not comment on policy questions about incentives and so on. Maybe
Tell
pass
me
it
your
off
name.
to
I
Ms.
can't
Hinman.
see your name tag.
Gross? I can switch.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I can swivel it.
I apologize. Would you start over?
I was just going to say I'd like to defer on policy grounds, not to talk about policy incentives and so on, defer over to my colleague here, Ms. Hinman.
You don't believe in electric cars?
Oh, totally support electric vehicles and drive 3 of them myself.
So if they're so swell, how come we're having to pay people to drive them?
So just speaking personally then, not representing my company at this point.
Sure.
Speaking personally.
Who's your company?
EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute.
Oh, okay.
And I have to be careful about policy stepping into, wading too deeply into policy as an independent leader here. But when we think about, again, I just want to ditto what Dr. Jenkins said. This is an effort to compete
yes,
globally.
ma'am, I know all that, but how, if they're so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, maybe then the quick answer for me is I didn't take advantage of incentives, but I also bought used vehicles on the market. I love it. They're wonderful to drive.
Okay.
Senator, similar for myself.
What's your name?
Maureen Hinman.
Damn.
My hair's longer in my picture, sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't even know who I'm talking to. Go ahead, Ms. Hinman.
I did want to follow up with my colleague, Ms. Gross. I purchased my first EV, fully
Yes,
electric.
ma'am, but
in
if they're so
2015.
swell, how come we have to pay people to drive?
Well, I purchased, I can only speak for myself, but we purchased our first vehicle in 2015 because it was easier to charge, cheaper to drive. It drives better, faster, smoother. There's no muck on the bottom of our garage. And frankly, when I had my first child, some of the safety features were just better.
But here's what I'm sorry, you're not answering my question. How many vehicles, how many cars do we have in the United States?
280.
This lady right here, in the middle. I'm sorry, if I could see your name, I wouldn't just point to you.
If I could, I'd like to defer to my colleague who has
I'd like
better.
to hear your answer, okay?
How many calls?
How many cars are there?
295 million?
Okay, and what percentage are electric vehicles?
1.6.
Okay, hold up that chart. Here's where all electric vehicles are. California loves them. The West Coast loves them. Everybody else is kind of lukewarm. Okay, and I'm trying to understand why. But let me move on to this. Let me ask these two gentlemen. I think the reason is because they're more expensive, and people when they drive a car like it to run, and when it runs out of electricity, it stops, and they can't find a place to charge them. So let me ask these two gentlemen. I don't want to be unfair. So it's clear we got a long way to go. We got 283 million cars in America, and we got 3.3 million electric vehicles. We got a long way to go. And at least these three folks think that we need to take taxpayer money and give enough money to American people so they'll walk away from gas cars and drive electric vehicles. How much is that going to cost? I'm going to ask them in a second if I have time. But how much do you think it will cost for us to basically bribe every American to drive an electric car?
Well, Senator, excuse me, Dave Sweeter with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I would just underscore your original question with this. There's really two things at play as it relates to what's happening.
How much money do you think it'll cost to bribe the American people enough to make them drive electric cars, to move those numbers?
Electrification's increasing as it relates to cost. Only a fraction of currently eligible vehicles are eligible for the federal tax credit. So,
how much do you think it'll cost, David?
Senator, I think I quoted earlier that.
I'm calling on you, sir.
Apologies.
How much do you think it'll cost?
It ultimately depends on consumer
adoption.
adoption.
You don't know, do you?
We don't have an exact figure.
You think,
no,
well, just keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot. How about you, Mr. Davis?
Eventually, if you put enough charging stations there to solve for range anxiety, because the reason I didn't buy one is because I may have to drive 450 miles to East Tennessee at spur of the moment.
The American taxpayer, for us to convince the American people, frankly, bribe the American people to get rid of the gas car and drive an electric car. Can any of you give me a figure?
Senator, the Treasury Department reports we spent about $1 billion year to date. So for the first half of this year, so roughly $2 billion this year.
We're behind.
As I noted,
how much do you think it'll cost, Doctor? You're a doctor,
so
right?
$2 billion this year is what the estimate from the Treasury Department.
How much do you think it will cost for us to, let's say, get 75% of these 200?
How much will it cost American consumers to remain?
How much? Do you know how much it'll cost, Doctor?
No one knows the future with certainty, Senator.
Right. You just think we ought to keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot.
I think we ought to set a stable policy framework that allows American consumers to become familiar with the environment and American businesses to innovate and to compete within that stable framework. That's what I said earlier in my testimony.
And how much will that cost?
Will cost less than the benefits delivered by the policy.
You don't care how much it costs, do you?
I care if the benefits exceed the costs. I don't care about the costs. These are investments in the public.
You don't care how much it costs, do you?
I care very much how much it costs. As long as the benefits exceed the cost, that's an investment worth making.
Well, so, okay.
How much
So-
does it cost to seed the industries of the future to China?
I get to ask the questions, Doc.
Sorry.
You're at Princeton, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How are Jewish students doing at Princeton? Are they feeling better?
That has
more
nothing to do with the hearing today. I'm
I
not going
didn't
to
think
comment on
you'd
that.
want- I didn't think you'd want to talk about that. Do any of you have any idea how much it would cost
Senator,
to get, say, 75% of the American people
Senator,
driving electric cars?
if I could, your question is fair. One answer to it is the cost of inaction of the U.S. not competing is far greater than any incentive on the front
Okay,
end.
quantify that for me. Oh, man, I'm way over. I'm sorry, Sheldon. Quantify that for me, because here's
Why
my...
don't you wrap up with this, because I think
I will.
everybody's had a chance to try to
I will.
answer your question, and
Here's
you're
my
repeating
problem.
it at this
Okay,
point.
we all want clean air, we all want bright water, we all want to eat, and we all want to live indoors. Okay? But there are trade-offs in all of this. Despite what the Princeton professor thinks, we don't have unlimited money. This is not Princeton. So we have to decide the cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die. And when I go back to my people and say, your electricity costs have gone up 30%, but it's for a good cause. Why, Kennedy? Because you're going to die if we don't do it. Why, Kennedy? Because a professor at Princeton says so. That doesn't work for most Americans. Can you answer that for me? You see my frustration. I love driving an electric car. I think they're really cool. But the median household income in my state's $55,000. Our Princeton professor probably makes that in a week. Okay? They don't care what they think at Princeton. Can you answer that for me, guys?
I can't answer how much it's going
Good.
to cost, but I can tell you that just last year alone, China in the EV market subsidized it by $12.4 billion, and that's their annual spend. It's more than, even with in our best year, it's more than two-thirds of the United States
great,
spends.
but let me ask you a question. How much will it cost China to become carbon neutral by 2050?
I am very concerned, well, they won't, but I'm more concerned about the
How much
risk
would it
to the
cost
U.S.
them?
economy of
How
losing
much
the
would
auto
it-
manufacturing industry.
How much would it cost them? Do you know? See, nobody talks about the cost. I'll tell you how much it'll cost them. It'll cost them $1 trillion a year, starting today, to be carbon neutral by 2050. You know how much it'll cost Russia? $250 billion a year. 3 times what their defense budget. Now, if you believe that Vladimir Putin is going to spend $250 billion for climate change, then you'll never own your own home. So we go spend all this money, which y'all can't quantify. We just keep spending. They don't spend the money. They're at an advantage, and you know how much world temperatures are lowered? None. Zero, zilch, nada. And I can't believe our chairman hadn't cut me off. But I am done.
Now's your moment. Thank you,
I am
Senator
done.
Kennedy, for your enthusiastic participation.
Let's suppose that Elon Musk decided to leave Tesla. General Motors hired him away. Said, we'll pay you $50 billion a year because we, General Motors, are sucking wind. And they are. But if we sign you up, we want an employment contract, and we're going to show you all our intellectual property, and we're going to insist that you sign a non-compete agreement. Now, you got General Motors, you got Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, people in the world. Why should those two not be allowed to negotiate an employment contract, including a non-compete agreement?
As I explained to Ms. Smith, I'm less worried about wage suppressing effects of non-competes on very high wage workers. Obviously, Elon Musk would be able to negotiate a non-compete with a new employer. He
Would
has
you have
incredible.
any problem saying that's okay?
There are other options for
Yeah, but
GM.
would you have a problem?
I would have a deep problem with saying that's okay because we're
You're
talking
just against all non-competes.
because of their effects on the economy, their effects on negative effects on workers, negative effects on consumers, and negative effects on the economy more broadly.
I just don't think you're very objective. I don't think you're a very objective witness. It's been my experience that most of these issues, there are always two sides. And no offense, you're entitled to your opinion. I enjoyed listening to you, but I can tell from your breathless presentation that you just feel passionately about this, and I respect that, but I think you're kind of blinded by your ideology. That's just my point of view. But I thank you for being here. And I went way over. Give Tina more time because she stayed within her limits, and I went way over. And I got to go vote.
All right. Thank you. So nearly 30 million people.
Time has expired.
Deeply wrong, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rabbi, do you believe there are a substantial number of people at Harvard University who believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to harass Jews?
I do.
That's a yes?
Yes.
And do you believe those people have acted on their self-anointed right to harass Jews?
Yes.
And has the administration at Harvard University allowed that to happen?
Yes.
Is that true at University of California at Berkeley?
Yes.
How about UCLA?
Yes.
How about NYU?
Yes.
A lot of other universities too. Isn't that the case?
That is correct.
Now, Title VI says that if you receive federal money, you can't harass Jews. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
Has the Biden-Harris administration taken away the money of Harvard?
No.
How about Berkeley?
Nope.
How about UCLA?
No, sir.
How about NYU?
No.
They've just talked, haven't they?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you think this condoned behavior at these universities, this condoned belief at these universities, and let me state it again, they believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to harass Jews? That's what they believe. What you do is what you believe. Everything else is just cottage cheese. Do you think that is consistent with their mission as universities?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So above and beyond the question of money, it is the morality, the purpose of higher education in America, is it not?
That is correct.
Ms. Berry, you are the executive director of the Arab American Institute. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay. And according to your website, you're also, I'm going to quote here, a longtime Democratic Party activist who served as a member of the 2016 Democratic National Convention's Platform Standing Committee, close quote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You support Hamas, do you not?
Senator, oddly enough, I'm going to say thank you for that question because it demonstrates the purpose of our hearing today in a very effective way.
Let's start first with a yes or no.
Hamas is a foreign terrorist organization that I do not support, but you asking the executive director of the Arab American Institute that question very much puts the focus on the issue of hate in our country.
Well, I got your answer, and I appreciate it. What is the, you support Hezbollah too, don't you?
Again, I find this line of questioning extraordinarily disappointing,
Is that a
Senator.
no?
That
Or
you have Arab American constituents that you represent in your great state.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that, but my time's limited, and I apologize, but is that a yes or a no?
Yes or no question to do I support Hezbollah? The answer is I don't support violence, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, or any other entity that invokes it.
You can't
So
bring
no,
yourself to say no, can you?
No, I can say no. I can say yes.
But
What
you
I can
haven't.
say is
You just
your
can't
line
make
of
yourself do
questioning.
it. Do you
Senator.
support or oppose Iran and their hatred of Jews?
Again, I'm going to emphasize Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, none of them is going to, this
You
discussion.
can't bring yourself to say no, can
Sir,
you?
I don't support.
It's real simple.
Excuse me, I'm going to,
Ian,
if I may, as a Muslim woman, sir, I'm going to tell you I do not support Iran. But what I will tell you is that this conversation.
I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. You called our decision to cut funding. You called our decision to cut fund. Well, first, what's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency?
It's UNRWA, which is the institution that exists to provide services and aid to the nearly 6 million Palestinian refugees.
And you called our decision to cut funding for them, quote, an incredible moral failure, close quote.
That is absolutely correct. But again, I would suggest that conversation is about foreign policy.
We did that because 9 UNRWA staff members were fired for actually helping Hamas on October 7th. Isn't that the case?
I don't believe that that's correct in terms of...
Let me ask you one more time. You support Hamas, don't you? You support UNRWA and Hamas, don't you?
Sir, please. I think it's exceptionally disappointing that you're looking at an Arab American witness before you and saying you support Hamas.
You know what's disappointing to me?
I do not support Hamas.
Bring yourself
I do not support Hamas.
You don't support UNRWA. You don't support Hamas. You don't.
I was very clear in my support for UNRWA.
Hezbollah, and you don't support Iran. You should hide your head in a bag.
Your time has expired. Please. Ms. Berry, I'm going to allow you to respond to any one or all of those questions at this point.
Senator Durbin, thank you very much for holding this hearing and for elevating the issue of hate crime. It's regrettable that as I sit here, have experienced the very issue that we're attempting to deal with today. The introduction of foreign policy is not how we keep Arab Americans or Jewish Americans or Muslim Americans or Black people or Asian Americans, anybody safe. This has been regrettably a real disappointment, but very much an indication of the danger to our democratic institutions that we're in now. And I deeply regret that, and I do hope that my testimony today has been helpful to understanding the need to respond to hate.
Over the weekend, I went to a synagogue in my hometown of Springfield. There was a bar mitzvah for a dear friend of mine. I couldn't help but notice the security guards that were posted for this bar mitzvah. In addition, I went to a meeting where a dear friend of mine, a Jewish friend of mine in Chicago, she's been my friend and worked for me for 40 years, was almost in tears over the anti-Semitism that she has witnessed. She was wearing a Star of David around her neck. And she said, I do that because I won't give up. I won't give up. I thought about it for this hearing, but I also thought about Wadia, a 6-year-old boy. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. I love her like life itself. I cannot imagine this poor little boy answering the door and losing his life because he's Palestinian. My God, we can't say those things that I've just said in the same sentence without some people saying, oh, you've just chosen sides. I'm not choosing sides here except for the side of, I hope, common decency and democracy. We've got to have this conversation. We've got to do it in a civilized manner. I regret some of the things that were said today at this hearing. But we are a free nation, and that's what happens in a democracy. As sad and as disquieting as it may be, that is part of it. The title of today's hearing was inspired by Dr. King's. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see Senator Blackburn. I was just concluding. Senator, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Harris, you mentioned as one of the tenets of regulation provenance. By that, do you mean notice, that when consumers deal with a robot, they should be told that it's a robot?
Thank you so much for your question,
You
Senator.
don't need to thank me. You can just answer it.
There are multiple elements of provenance technologies. One is disclosure. And yes, that is saying that if a company uses AI and has AI interacting with you, that it should disclose that you are interacting with an AI system or a bot. But another element of...
So number one is notice. If I'm interfacing with a robot or with artificial intelligence, the owner of that artificial intelligence should tell me as a consumer, I'm a robot.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's number one. Tell me what number two is.
So number two is sometimes referred to as watermarking. I know that this committee heard in April testimony about this topic of watermarking. And watermarking can happen in one of two ways. It can be either a visible or direct disclosure that content, for example, an AI-generated image, an AI-generated audio file, video, or even text, can be a direct disclosure that it's AI-generated. You've seen watermarks that have...
I get it. So that's another form of notice.
Yeah, you could call it that. But that's direct watermarking. Then there's also another technique, which is a more indirect disclosure, which is hiding an invisible signal within the text of a piece of text that's generated by AI, within an image, which is a hidden pattern of pixels.
What good does that do in terms of a consumer?
Well, the good thing about that is that it can be much more difficult to remove than simply a notice that says this was produced by AI at the top or bottom of a picture that you could just crop out and remove very easily. So watermarks have value in that sense. There's also another technology that was also discussed in April here, which is called digital fingerprinting. This technology has been used to keep track of child sexual abuse material and terrorist content circulating online. And that creates what's called a hash, a unique identifier for images, audio files, could be even done with text or videos, and that's stored in a database, and that can associate a piece of content and then identify it as AI generated.
All these are forms of notice.
Some more direct than others, I would call them forms of...
I'm not trying to trick you, I'm trying to understand. Are there any companies that are giving the world proper notice right now? Anybody?
So, I'm happy to answer that.
Sure.
So according to their public statements...
Yes or no, please, sir, because I got other ground to cover.
Google DeepMind SynthID is the name of the technology. Looks good. I haven't tested it.
But they're trying to give notice.
Yeah.
Okay. Licensing. What good is licensing going to do? I mean, you go to the government and say, okay, here, give me a license. What good is that going to do?
Well...
Anybody.
I'm happy to take that one also briefly. As is the case in many professions, the law, medicine, you need a license to practice, and if you violate the code of that profession, you can no longer practice. And with technology, I see no reason why it should be different.
So with the license, we should have a code of behavior?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And what should be in that code of behavior?
Again, happy to offer this to any of my co-panelists here, but I believe that ethics are critical, that artificial intelligence systems should be designed in ways that they can't harm human beings, that they don't do damage to people, that they don't discriminate, that they don't give people advice that brings harm to them, that's incorrect. Those are a few elements of the code.
So basically, I'm trying to understand this.
Yes.
Because I think you're all extraordinarily bright. That's obvious. But the American people don't understand what you're talking about, okay? And frankly, many times neither do I. So you license with a code of behavior. Now, that would require government to set up some sort of agency to enforce that code of behavior. Is that correct?
This is an area where there are actually multiple interesting proposals. There's a law professor at Fordham Law School named Chinmayi Sharma who has been writing about creating a malpractice regime for engineers who develop AI.
Well, that's what I'm getting to next. Liability. It is possible for the private sector to enforce through liability. Why are our tort laws right now, our contract laws right now, not adequate?
Again, go ahead.
I can jump in on that.
Yes.
At present, it's very unclear how AI should be thought of and how different actors in what gets called the value chain should take responsibility for unintended outcomes. The best comparison that people turn to is issues with software, issues with cybersecurity, which I think many tort experts, which I am not one, consider to be an area of liability that has not been especially successful in allocating responsibility for harms. And so, that's not an especially promising precedent necessarily, and also AI is very different from the kinds of software you're used to dealing with, and the problems and harms that AI can cause are different from cybersecurity issues. So I think liability is a way, if there can be clear allocation of liability, that's a way of sort of flexibly setting incentives that depend on the specifics of any given case that could potentially be quite helpful if it were possible to provide more clarity.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rabbi, do you believe there are a substantial number of people at Harvard University who believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to harass Jews?
I do.
That's a yes?
Yes.
And do you believe those people have acted on their self-anointed right to harass Jews?
Yes.
And has the administration at Harvard University allowed that to happen?
Yes.
Is that true at University of California at Berkeley?
Yes.
How about UCLA?
Yes.
How about NYU?
Yes.
A lot of other universities too. Isn't that the case?
That is correct.
Now, Title VI says that if you receive federal money, you can't harass Jews. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
Has the Biden-Harris administration taken away the money of Harvard?
No.
How about Berkeley?
Nope.
How about UCLA?
No, sir.
How about NYU?
No.
They've just talked, haven't they?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you think this condoned behavior at these universities, this condoned belief at these universities, and let me state it again, they believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to harass Jews. It's what they believe. What you do is what you believe. Everything else is just cottage cheese. Do you think that is consistent with their mission as universities?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So above and beyond the question of money, it is the morality, the purpose of higher education in America, is it not?
That is correct.
Chairman, thank you for being here. Professor Mascott, this case that we're talking about, Trump v. United States, it was before the United States Supreme Court because the Biden administration decided to criminally prosecute former President Trump. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And in fact, President Biden's lawyer actually asked for expedited review and an expedited decision by the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes, the prosecution would have found expedited review helpful.
When the court handed down its opinion, well, strike that. The title of our hearing is, quote, "When the president does it, that means it's not illegal." And Chairman Durbin explained what he meant by that, but I just want the record to be clear. Did the Supreme Court, in its opinion, ever say, quote, "When the president does it, that means it's not illegal"?
No, that doesn't appear in the opinion.
All right. At the oral argument of this case, President Biden's lawyer actually conceded, did he not, that core functions of a president should have absolute immunity?
Yeah, I do think there's agreement that core functions should have immunity.
In fact, President Biden's lawyer said, quote, "Core functions can't be regulated at all."
That's correct.
Close quote.
Yes.
Okay. What is forum shopping?
Forum shopping is the act of trying to find a court that you think is going to rule favorably to you.
Does it go on in the United States?
Many folks think that it does.
Yeah, it does. It's hard to stop. Let's just stipulate for a moment that America's withdrawal from Afghanistan was not a model of efficiency. People died, including Americans. Can you imagine a scenario with respect to President Biden, now former President Biden? Can you imagine a scenario in which a district attorney in a jurisdiction that repeatedly voted overwhelmingly against President Biden and whose voters did not like President Biden? Can you imagine a scenario in which an ambitious district attorney, after President Biden is out of office, could bring a charge against former President Biden for criminal negligence in the death of Americans? Can you imagine that?
Well, Senator, that would be very troubling, and so that's one of the things.
But can you imagine it happening?
I could imagine district or attorneys wanting to bring such an action. Sure.
I mean, now that we've decided that former presidents can be prosecuted, this current case before us is the first instance, but I fear it's not going to be the last. Now, let's suppose this ambitious district attorney in an anti-Biden jurisdiction or venue decided to prosecute former President Biden, which I think would be a mistake. But he meaning former President Biden, would have to defend himself, wouldn't he?
Yes.
And suppose he won. He'd still have to pay his lawyer, wouldn't he?
That's true.
Are lawyers cheap?
Only those of us who teach.
No, strike that. I know they're cheap. Are they inexpensive?
No, they're not.
So President Biden could spend millions of dollars.
That's true.
Even if he won.
Yes, sir.
Now, let's suppose after that trial was finished, another ambitious district attorney in another venue or another jurisdiction decided to do the same thing. And then another. And then another. Can you understand what the court was talking about when it said we can't allow the court system to have a chilling effect on a president, any president, in making these decisions? Can you understand that?
Absolutely. The risk of facing that would certainly significantly impact how a president would make decisions in office, and that's the last thing we want.
Can I have 30 more seconds, Mr. Chairman? I don't want to mispronounce your name, sir. Don't count my fumbling around against me. Mr. Lacavara?
Never have.
You were vociferous in your criticism of this opinion that the words presidential immunity don't appear in the Constitution. Is that right?
That's part of it, yes, sir.
Do the words separation of powers appear in the Constitution?
No, I acknowledge that there is a structure called the separation of powers.
Is there any doubt in your mind that we have separation of powers in the United States Constitution?
No, and I think it's important to understand what the separation of powers does and does not imply. And
Right.
what it does not imply, in my judgment, is the kind of immunity that the Supreme Court established here.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, and thank you to our witnesses. Thank you, Chair Durbin, for holding this important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much. Senator Kennedy, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Senator Warner, I appreciate your comments. I've been very, very perceptive. Thank you. Let me say first, Mr. Speaker, I've served with a lot of speakers of the House back in Louisiana. God bless you. You know, you've got an automatic place in heaven.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have your job for all the money in the world.
I can say the same about yours, Senator.
Well, no, you've got to herd all these free-range chickens that
That's
wander
true.
off and go catch them, and sometimes you can catch some and sometimes you can't.
It's very
So
true.
Thank
you.
you for your service. Mr. Williams, if the price of electricity goes up, does that make a house more expensive?
Not in a direct sense, but I mean, electricity is an input to a lot of things, both on the construction
Well,
side.
it makes home ownership more expensive.
Sure, yes. And
All right. If property taxes go up, does that make home ownership more expensive?
sure does.
If homeowners insurance goes up, does that make homeownership more expensive?
Indeed.
If interest rates, particularly mortgage rates, go up, does that increase the cost of home ownership?
It does.
A lot, right?
Depends on a lot of factors, but sure, it could.
If I mean, when you own a home, you're going to have repairs. If the cost of home maintenance and repairs goes up, does that make home ownership more expensive?
Indeed.
Okay. If you, whether you agree with it or not, if you admit 10 to 12 foreign nationals illegal into your country, all of whom need housing, does that make the cost of home ownership go up?
You know, I think that all of these questions and all of these inputs to
but
housing costs.
What about illegal immigration? Does that increase demand for housing and make the cost of home ownership go up?
I think that's a distributional question. I think the question we're here to talk about today
Yeah,
is
but does it make the cost of home ownership go up?
We're here to talk about housing supply
No,
today.
we're here to talk
creating
about home
jobs.
ownership and the cost of owning a home. You're a bright man. Does that make the cost of home ownership go up when you increase demand that much?
I think that's a distributional question.
You don't want to admit it, do you?
I think that's a distributional question, and the problem that we're facing
With
is
all due
housing
respect,
supply.
I think you're being disingenuous. Let me ask you, Mr. Pinto, if you increase immigration by 11 million people, does that increase the cost of home ownership?
Senator, yes. We've tried to figure out what that impact is.
I mean, duh.
Yeah, but the federal government doesn't publish where they're distributing these individuals around the country, so we can't do the kinds of experiments that we normally do.
It causes home ownership to go up in some places.
But we can't figure out exactly what it is. We'd love to.
I'm not
we
here
need
to
the
play
data.
games. I'm here to try to get some answers.
But if you could get more data, that would be great.
I'm sorry?
If you could get the data released by the federal government as to where.
I'll give you some data. Mortgage rates are up 123%. Premiums for homeowners are up 16%. The average electricity bill in America is up 28%.
That affects the cost of home ownership. No wonder people can't buy a home. This dollar, thanks to President Biden and Vice President Harris's inflation, they've been inflation machines. This dollar was worth $1 when President Biden and Vice President Harris took office. It's worth 75 cents today. That's the fundamental problem with home ownership. The other problem is government regulation. Look, the HUD and the USDA recently adopted the International Energy Conservation Code. Do any of you know what that is? Okay, well, I'm not going to ask you because it's going to take time. They recently adopted the International Energy Conservation Code put out by the International Code Council. And the Biden-Harris administration just said, they just told HUD and the USDA to adopt it. So if you want a HUD or USDA loan or access to the housing assistance, you've got to build a home that complies with the International Energy Conservation Code. You know how much it's going to add to the price of a new home? $31,835. Are you kidding me? You know how much energy you're going to save?
Senator Kennedy, you're well into Senator Padilla's time now.
$7. We need to start with the basics, folks. It's inflation that's killing our people, and it's this crazy whack job regulation.
Senator Kennedy, you're well into Senator Padilla's time now.
I'm sorry, Senator.
That's all right.
Senator.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Kennedy, I would happily.
Senator Kennedy, and I'm also going to, obviously ask your questions. Still, I will not be firmly enforcing any time limit, sir.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Ms. Hernandez, Bailey and Madison are here?
Bailey, my oldest daughter, is here, yes.
Where's Bailey? Hey, Bailey. Welcome. You were in a federal prison, Ms. Hernandez?
Yes, sir. The FCI Tallahassee.
And when did the rapes by this federal prison employee of you occur? Just what year?
Well, it started in about 2020, and then ended in 2022, August of 2022.
Okay. And you reported him.
I did.
And he was eventually punished.
Correct.
And what was his punishment?
3 months.
Was he prosecuted?
Yes.
I mean, in federal court or state court, if you know?
I don't know if it was state court or not. I know it was in Florida.
Yeah. And he got 3 months for rape?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's part of the problem right there. What you allow is what will continue. I mean, 3 months for rape is absurd, much less for repeated rape. Ms. White, let me ask you a question. You talked about inmates violating sexually and being engaging in offensive conduct with respect to female federal prison staff.
Yes, sir.
Are those inmates who do that not punished?
No, sir, not typically.
Why not?
That's a very good question. Oftentimes, the incidents are reported. Our prisons are very overpopulated. Discipline is an issue that we have been struggling with even when they are reported, it's handled internally with a small sanction. Typically, they're removed from general population and placed in special housing unit for a limited amount of time and then placed back in general housing. It's not a true punishment, and it definitely is not a deterrent. Oftentimes, those issues are turned over to the AUSA offices who decline to prosecute the inmates.
Okay. Ms. Bowler, let me ask you a couple questions. I want to be sure I understand your testimony. The state of California has a law that says if you're convicted of a crime, you can declare your gender and you can go to a women's prison if you are biologically a male, but declare yourself transgender. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Does the state of California require any confirmation of one's gender identity?
There is some type of review process, but it is based on the individual's self-declared gender identity. These individuals don't have to be identifying as transgender or non-binary prior to being convicted and entering prison. It is based on their self-declared gender identity. And I will note that many female inmates we have talked to tell us once they gain access to women's prisons behind closed doors, they are no longer identifying as transgender. They are embracing their natural male identity.
Is this primarily an issue in California, or does your organization get reports from other states?
It is certainly the most pervasive in California, since California was on the forefront, one of the first states in the country to pass this state law. But the BOP also generally recommends housing inmates based on their gender identity. There is, again, a review process there.
Wait, you say the BOPs, that's the federal prison
Bureau
system?
of Prison. Under the Biden-Harris administration, they ordered federal prisons to recognize trans-identified inmates' health and safety when making housing decisions, and even declared for the first time that gender-affirming surgery may be medically appropriate, which means taxpayers would be funding it.
These rapes that you talked about, do we have any idea how many have occurred nationwide?
I think that is one of the problems, and that was one of the problems, my understanding, going into PRERA, that there was a lack of reporting. I can tell you in California, state numbers are that 2,186 trans-identified inmates exist in the state. As of now, I'm aware of 351 of them requesting to go to female
Could you give me those numbers once more? I apologize.
2,186 trans-identified inmates currently exist, according to the latest numbers reported by California. Of those, only 351 of them are actually trying to go into female prisons. And I'd also note, in 2022, 1/3 of trans-identifying inmates seeking access to the female prisons were registered sex offenders.
Okay, so there are 2,200 transgender women in women's prisons in California?
Those are just all trans-identified individuals, so they could be biological men or biological women, from my understanding.
Okay. All right, last question, and I've really gone way over here. Mr. James and Ms. Abate, give me 30 or 45 seconds if you were President of the United States, what you would do to fix this problem.
Microphone, you should say that with more bass in your voice. You're president.
Yes, sir.
You're president,
yes, sir.
so let it be heard.
As President of the United States, I would do an executive order asking for additional funding for all incarceration facilities across this nation, increase staffing, and push that all correctional facilities have professional employees who are heroes. The reason I would say that is because if you think of the worst things that happens in this country and the worst people who conduct these things, where are they housed? And who is monitoring those individuals where they are? If we look at how we celebrate people in this nation, rightly so, we call our heroes our military, our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, and our EMTs. But we forget the people who monitor the people we call the worst in our country. And so one of the reasons we don't have a robust correctional staffing in this country is because we don't celebrate those people who take the risk to be correctional officers.
Let me ask you this, Mr. James.
Yes, sir.
And I don't disagree with anything you said. How about adding to your list punishing the hell out of people who rape other people in prison?
I agree. But president doesn't make laws, sir.
Yes, sir. But when you get to be president, I'll bet you can get it done.
Yes, sir. Will you vote for me, sir?
Yes, sir.
We all heard that.
Ms. Abate.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
I'm looking for specific, how do we stop this?
So first of all, I think we have to realize that when we over-sentence people for any crimes, we're overpopulating our prisons. At the same time, staffing numbers are dwindling. That is dangerous for incarcerated people.
I know, but you can't let people rape other people, whether in prison or outside of prison.
So let's focus on what the people involved in this system need. And the people that are in the prisons need access to outside folks so they can have support, so they can report things safely, so that they can receive counseling from community organizations that can translate into when they leave the facility, so they can have that ability to heal from the trauma and process what's happened to them. We need to ensure that staff are provided with what they need to do their jobs, including adequate training, adequate numbers, the ability to take a day off to go see a kid's recital without having to call in sick because you know you won't be allowed to go, thereby forcing other folks to supplement when you need time off. We have to take care of the people in these institutions because as much as some staff are the problem in this area, all staff are the solution. We have to listen to Ms. White, we have to listen to Mr. James, listen to the field what they need. We have to continue our efforts to enforce these PREA standards. They're providing us with the best answer. We've had criminal laws saying you can't rape anybody anywhere. Raping people in custody has always been against everyone's policies, and yet we still needed to, in 2003, pass the Prison Rape Elimination Act. That's outrageous. So that was designed to study how does it happen? What is it about these systems? And so I urge us to look at those reasons, look at what came from those discussions, bipartisan discussions, PREA Rape Commission and the commissioners, and see what we came up with at the at DOJ ultimately. I think it provides the best answer and the best way to cure the situation, but we have to have adequate funding and attention, and we have to listen to people, we have to believe them, regardless of what color your uniform is. If it's orange, if it's blue or brown, staff are reporting these things, they know what's going on, they are not being listened to. We've got to hold facility and agency leadership accountable and to take action when they find out about this stuff because they know, and they don't, and that is not okay. And if agencies aren't listening to their leaders, and their staff, you think people didn't know that a warden was raping people? They did. They reported. Nothing happened. How are women ever supposed to come forward? How are men supposed to come forward who've experienced sexual abuse in custody? We have to support the people that work and live in our prisons.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here. I've learned a lot. They're blowing up my phone here. You can't hear it because I put it on silent. Because I've got to be back in my office. So I'm going to have to take leave. I'm asking my staff here and making a note to myself. Ms. Hernandez, I'm going to find out why someone raped you and got 3 months of punishment.
Thank you.
I'm going to find that out. Okay? That's not right.
Thank you.
I mean, that's not justice. And I want to thank my friend, Senator Booker, for calling this hearing. Corey always has interesting topics, and I always learn a lot. And I would have let White House go first if he had been here.
I will never bicker if you fail to call me Booker. But I really, I know how demanding the day is. And I know you were,
I'm sorry.
no, you were stepping in at the last minute. So I really appreciate you. And again, we're praying for Senator Cotton in this time of grief. All right.
Thank you,
sir.
folks. I'm sorry what happened to y'all. I mean, I'm really sorry.
Thank you, sir.